Okay, we're now live.
All right, thanks very much, Ms. Levesque. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Township of Georgian Bay Council meeting for Monday, January 10th, 2022. Happy New Year to everyone. Hope that 2022 works out to be a more, shall we say, a less challenging year than the last 2 years, but I guess only time will tell. We don't know how this pandemic is going to unfold on top of everything else. In the spirit of reconciliation, we wish to acknowledge the enduring relationship between Indigenous peoples and the territories they have traditionally occupied. We recognize and deeply appreciate the historic connection that they have to this place, the land, the water, the sky, and that all that live on, in, and above it. We are grateful for the opportunity to meet here, and we thank all the generations of Indigenous peoples who have taken care of this place and who continue to care for it. And we want to show our respect. Hundreds of years after the first treaties were signed and remain relevant today, may they guide our decisions and our actions. We commit to learn, to educate, to honor sacred places, and to take actions towards real truth and reconciliation. Miigwech. Councillors, does anybody have any declarations of pecuniary interest or any conflicts of interest that they wish to declare? Councillor Cooper.
Actually, it's a question, Mayor, with respect to number 3 on our agenda. I'm kind of confused by this. This is a new addition, I think, and it doesn't exactly align with our strategic vision that we have. So I wondered where this came from. Maybe it was passed by council, but I don't recall council working on this list and putting the environment number 3. Could you have somebody comment on that, please? Thank you.
Ms. Way, would you be the appropriate person?
Certainly. So as per the new procedural bylaw, it's noted that the strategic plan initiatives need to be listed on the agenda for a visual reminder to all committee members. There is no rhyme or reason as to the order these are in. That's not a priority. It's just the order that they happen to be listed on when we pull them from our staff reports. It's come to my attention that perhaps this isn't the most current version, even though this is the version we're using on our staff reports at the moment. So we're looking at updating that for the next agenda.
So if I might just say that, you know, there are a number of things here that are certainly very worthy. It's just not the list that our council worked on. That's really all I'm trying to drive at. And if we need to make additions, I wouldn't necessarily be against that. I just think we need to reflect what we actually approved. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that. I think I agree with Ms. Way. I mean, we did approve the strategic directions. I'll get to you in a moment, Councillor Hazelton. We did approve these strategic directions a few months ago, and the list that we approved was in a little bit different, not much different, but a little different than what has been presented. And I think this is something that, as much as I think it's a wonderful idea to have these reminders in front of us, I think we can refine how they are presented. And I think that's a project that we will work on. Councillor Hazelton.
Yes, I just wanted to recommend that since we do have an approved strategic plan with 5 strategic goals, that to keep that section 3 succinct and crisp, I would recommend that we just extract the 5 strategic goals from our most recently approved strategic plan and use those as the items in there. Otherwise, we'll likely just gloss over them and just look at it as fillers. So 5 simple items, I think, would be ideal. And they're already approved. We don't need to revisit that topic. Thank you.
Thank you. Not seeing any other input at this point. We'll leave that as an area for refinement. And I think I've already confirmed that no one has any declarations of pecuniary interest at this stage. So next on our agenda are a couple of delegations. And so Ms. Way or Ms. Levesque, whoever coordinates the folks coming in, we would appreciate that you doing so. All right, I believe I see Mr. Haupt, and if he would
Yes.
make.
Good morning, everyone.
I'm wondering
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wonder if you could confirm to me how I should appropriately pronounce your last name.
Well, that's probably the most challenging part. It's a German name, but the proper pronunciation is Haupt.
Haupt?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Okay, so I do have one little, once I joined the meeting here, I got invited as a delegate. I've lost my second screen viewing, which is the one I wanted to share with you. So if Karen, if you have any smart input for me here, that'd be appreciated. What screen do you guys all see right now?
We just see you like on Zoom. We can't see you. Your video's not on. Okay, now we can see you.
Okay, wonderful. Hi, everybody.
Can you see the Zoom screen?
I'm seeing the Zoom screen on one screen, and I'm seeing a big picture of you on the other, but it's the other screen that I need to share with you, right? So. Oh gosh.
At the bottom, you should have an option to share your screen.
Okay, bear with me. And we should be in business.
There we go.
Okay, so once again, good morning, everybody. And thank you for allowing us some time in the schedule here this morning. My name again is Dan Haupt, and I represent Zimmer Air Services down out of Chatham and St. Thomas, Ontario. This delegation is the first of two presentations that are intended to demonstrate the safety of aerial applications and the use of Bt organic insecticides. Mr. Stephen Nicholson, he will be speaking to the organic insecticide science, while I would like to address the aerial application portion of it. So Zimmer Air Services is one of Canada's leading aerial application service providers. It is owned by Paul Zimmer, and we have been in operation since 1975. We are quite unique in that we are exclusively an aerial application company. For example, we don't fight fires, or we don't do heli skiing or such other items. We are a Transport Canada authorized repair facility, and this means simply that we can do all our own maintenance in-house as well. So the big question, what do we do? Well, first of all, the default that comes to mind is agricultural crop protection services. And then other things like agricultural fertilizer spreading, granular applications into maple sugar woodlots, or for instance, spreading lime as part of a soil rejuvenation at old industrial sites. Mosquito larvicide, mosquito control, I should say. So vector disease control programs such as this help reduce diseases like West Nile virus by spreading a larvicide into large areas of standing water. These larvicides are an organic Bt-based bacterial insecticide that only affect mosquito larvae. Protection of natural resources, for instance, forest regeneration after forest fire or harvesting, invasive species control, such as helping to mitigate the spread of invasive Phragmites, or helping to reduce the effects of invasive defoliators, such as spruce and pine budworm, and of course others like tent caterpillar or the LDD moth. Severe defoliator outbreaks can have a disastrous effect on woodlands, reducing tree species, altering historic ecological habitats, and even contribute or even cause severe forest fires. So the big question, why aerial? Why not other methods? Well, first of all, it's cost effective and an efficient way of covering larger areas. So product placement, BTK products, for instance, must be ingested by the caterpillar to have any effect on them whatsoever. as the LDD caterpillars feed first in the upper canopy. Coverage of those upper leaves is crucial. Spraying BTK from the ground, aiming for upper canopy coverage, simply doesn't provide accurate control of either volume or product placement. So organic insecticides. So in many cases, we could use a chemical insecticide for caterpillar control, like LDD moth caterpillar control. It would actually be way more effective, but using a BT is certainly the safest for the environment and everything. So I'd like to talk about the precision, the technology that we use in today's aerial applications. So, and it's certainly evolved from the old barnstormer days. So let's even start with the nozzle types used for various applications. In the case of defoliators, we use a ultra low volume atomizer. These allow extremely uniform and small droplets to be created that are large enough not to evaporate or drift off target, yet small enough to give excellent leaf coverage. For LDD moth control, only about 1.6 liters is dispersed over an entire acre. So most of these droplets would never even make it to the ground. They strictly get captured by that upper canopy. Today's global positioning systems, combined with the sophisticated GIS software and precision flow controls, enable pilots to disperse specific calibrated amounts of product into designated areas, predetermined by that GPS. Here you have a cockpit view of that system. A target area is created as a shapefile, an outline of the property essentially, and this is uploaded to the guidance system. The pilot then flies along according to the calibrated swath width, and the computer will automatically turn on and off the spray as the aircraft flies into and out of that designated area. At the same time, a flow control system monitors the aircraft speed and will adjust the flow rate to compensate for slight deviances in aircraft speed in order to maintain the exact target application rate, liters per hectare, for example. It is also precise. It is so precise that the pilot can actually tell within seconds when his tank will run out. The flight path of the aircraft and exactly where that aircraft dispersed product is all recorded. By law, this data must be stored and kept for auditing purposes, along with exact dates and times and even weather parameters. This spray data can then be overlaid onto aerial image programs such as Google Earth. This here, for example, was a Gypsy moth application done in 2019 in Frontenac County. There's, of course, other technology available to us as well. In this case, this helps with useful timing of applications across the province. For example, Bioforce publishes a biosimulator which accurately predicts the hatch of various species, such as gypsy moth, according to current and historic weather patterns. This is information resource that we couldn't have even imagined back in '75. This slide here, I'll probably skip here, just it shows the organic certification of the BTK and the trade name of the BTK product that we use for gypsy moth applications. Stephen will address this more in the next presentation. The biggest thing in our industry, of course, is governance. So there are likely few sectors as closely regulated and monitored as we are. Aside from the standard labor laws, health and safety regulations, WSIB legislations, WMIS, PDG, and many, many others. An aerial applicator is regulated at both the federal and the provincial levels. So number one, the federal government laws. The PMRA is the Pest Management Regulatory Agency, is an arm of Health Canada. And they enact the pest control products regulations under the Pest Control Act of Canada. They control what products can be used in Canada, how they can be used, stored, and even transported. Much of this, as it pertains to us, for example, is dedicated through the registered label of a product. Each province will also have their own governing body. So for example, Ontario has the Pesticide Act and specific to the pesticide application, Regulation 6309. These regulations are enforced by the Ontario Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. The OMECP, the Ontario Ministry of Environment, Parks, regulate the transport, storage, sale, application, and disposal of pesticides in the province. So our pilots, ground crew, and even ourselves as a company have to undergo regular testing and renewal processes in order to maintain our licensing. In some cases, specialized permits need to be issued for certain types of applications. When product-related permits are required, it's the Ontario Ministry that issues these. Both Health Canada and the Ontario Ministry can and do audit us very, very regularly. Pesticide legislation on a municipal level must always follow both the provincial and the federal Pesticide Act. So aerial applications are inevitably held to a higher standard. Understandably, done incorrectly, there could be a greater risk to environment, human, or other species. So buffer zones, for example, any chemical-based pesticide will have a much greater buffer zone to sensitive areas when applied by air versus by ground. So a side note here, BT products are so safe that there simply are no buffer zones required by any means of application, whether ground or air. So product restrictions, some products simply can't be applied by air. It's just not allowed, and usually that's restricted on the provincial side. Then weather parameters. A product label will mandate that an aerial application is restricted to lower wind levels than by ground applications, for example. And then, of course, nozzle technology. Aerial applicators utilize some very unique nozzles designed to almost eliminate drifting of product off target. And then we have even more governance. So as an aviation company, we are, of course, also regulated heavily by Transport Canada. Not just as a company, but also every pilot, every engineer is licensed by Transport Canada. Being an aerial applicator flying low over terrain rewards us with even further stringent regulations than an average aerial company, understandably so. So Zimmer Air Services is one of the few helicopter companies that's authorized to conduct low-level operations over populated areas. Spray programs over urban areas such as cities and towns to protect high-value green space require extensive safety planning, specialized permits, traffic plans, and most importantly, the use of twin-engine helicopters. We regularly conduct these types of programs for public establishments here in Ontario and across the country. So I emphasize that most cottage country properties are not classified as urban according to Transport Canada. No form of permits are required to apply a BT product on typical rural cottage areas. We do, in some cases, cancel properties should they present any sort of unnecessary risk to either flight crew or people on the ground. So this year for 2022, we have tasked the Ontario Centre for Forest Defoliator Control with administering private LDD moth control programs. Municipal programs are dealt with directly still by us. And then should anyone wish to enroll, it's very simple to do so via a link in the OCFDC landing page. And you'll see that link on the bottom here. So the big question that everybody always has, does it work? This is a picture taken about 2 weeks after a dual application of BT along a lakeshore in Frontenac County. So this is the same area as the spray data pictures that I presented earlier in this presentation. And so once again, thanks everybody for the opportunity and the time. And of course, I'm open to any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Haupt. I wonder if you could stop sharing your screen. And you are almost inside the 10-minute limit that we have on delegation. So I appreciate that as well. I see at this point, Councillor Cooper's hand up. So we'll start with Councillor Cooper, please.
Thank you, Mayor Kutsir, and thank you for the presentation, Mr. Haupt. I have a couple of quick questions. One is you talked about sort of weather and wind. I would assume it also, weather would include precipitation. There could be some challenges with that as well. So I'm glad to hear that is the case. What, in terms of wind, for example, do you have sort of a limitation as to when you can operate or not?
Yeah, so this is often dictated on the label of a product then. So you could look up essentially any product that's registered for use in Canada that has an aerial label component. So first of all, if there's an aerial label component, we're allowed to spray it by air. If there's no aerial component, we're simply not allowed to spray it by air. And essentially that will include those buffer zones as well as wind restrictions when applied by air. So typically in a lot of cases, it's 16 kilometers an hour. Side note here for BT applications.
Mr. Haupt, we're having a little trouble understanding you. I don't know if something changed with your microphone.
I don't think I've changed anything. Is anything?
I think you got too close to it.
Yeah, I think.
How about now?
That's better.
Okay. So sorry about that. So again, the label dictates the wind parameters.
A little farther back, please.
The label dictates the wind parameters. And I believe for BTK, it's 16 kilometers an hour winds. We function much lower winds than that. Because it's a low volume application, we'll typically aim for about 8 to 10 kilometer an hour winds if possible.
Thank you for that. I just had one other question, and that is, you're based in, I think, Chatham, sort of southwestern Ontario. And how do you handle, this is quite a distance. I know helicopters can move at a reasonably good rate, but do you fly up every day from Chatham, or just curious, how do you handle the sort of local application if you have a fairly significant one?
Yeah, and that's the nice thing about utilizing helicopters. And I guess I go to, as an example, to our forestry applications when we're way up north, north of Thunder Bay and the extremely remote wildernesses. Whether down here we use hotels or whether we utilize our own camper trailer facility, we have all that to accommodate our staff.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis, please.
Yeah, I appreciate the presentation as well, Dan. Thank you. My question is with regards to the LDD moth in particular. It has a very, very narrow, there's a very narrow time period in which BTK is effective against the LDD, and allowing for weather and other complications. Have you been known not to be able to spray under certain contract conditions because your window of opportunity is passed?
It's rare, but yes, there are always situations where unpredictable. Weather is always our biggest factor, of course, right? So yeah, it can happen, but our fleet and our management style is quite used to dealing with weather. We know what the aircraft fleet can handle on an average basis, not in a best case scenario. So we always leave some leadway for, unforeseen circumstances, and that can be anything. I mean, at times you can have an aircraft, go down with a maintenance issue. So we have to accommodate any of those kind of scenarios, and we do that up front.
Thank you. One further follow-up question, if you don't mind, Mr. Mayor.
Right.
And that is, what's the smallest piece of property that you can spray?
Good question. The important part of any sort of an aerial application is that properties are conjoined together. So can we do a half-acre property? Absolutely. Is it efficient and economical for us to do so? Probably not. We will incorporate them at times if they're close to others. But if they're so small that, for example, a single swath width of the aircraft can't effectively cover it, there's no sense in doing it. And then we'll just open that up to the customer and say, listen, we can't effectively cover your property. That makes any sense. So smallest, anything less than a quarter of an acre, half an acre, that sort of thing. There's a lot of parameters that come into play.
Thank you. Councillor Volchek.
Thanks for the presentation, Dan. Just one quick question. What other animals outside of the gypsy moth does this affect? And when I say animals, I'm talking any living thing on this planet.
So I guess this is a question that's going to be best answered by the next delegate, Stephen Nicholson. There's very few, if any, other species. In fact, BTK is specific just to Lepidoptera and caterpillars. So it can't affect bees, it can't affect houseflies, it just simply will not affect those creatures, as far as I understand. But that's a question for Stephen, and best a question after his presentation.
Thank you.
All right, I'm not seeing other hands, so I'm going to say thank you very much. And I think this, we appreciate all the information. I think in conjunction with our next delegation, we'll end up with a council more informed than when we started this morning. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I'm going to ask our clerks to bring in our next delegate, please. All right, Mr. Nicholson, I do see you on our screen. At least your block, I don't see your face. There we go.
Okay.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, all. Let me set my little timer here so I don't overstay my welcome.
Thank you for the invitation. But we'll remind you if you go too far over.
I've been to the odd council meeting in my life, so I know how that rolls. So, but I prefer to try and manage it here on my side. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you people about the situation today. And Dan, you did a lovely job on talking about your side of the equation. I focused, you'll see I've provided a PowerPoint for you people, and I'll share my screen, and you also all have it. And I looked specifically at addressing the concerns raised by Elizabeth Loughton, the local beekeeper in Honey Harbor. A couple of general comments on safety, the product. Oh, I should back up. I did work for Valent Biosciences. I worked for 3 or 4 different BTK companies. I started as a student in the early 70s. I worked running or being involved in spray programs on 6 continents, the only one being the Antarctic, but all of the continents I've worked on over the years. I've been doing this for all of my adult life. And I was involved in some of the early spraying in the Muskokas 20 to 30 years ago. So anytime there's a spraying program for forest health, things like gypsy moth or spruce butterworm, I'm usually involved, either as a vendor or as an applicator. I had a fleet of aircraft for a while, consultant, worked for the governments, federal, doing research. Anyway, I come to the table with a wide range of experience. And I've worked with Zimmer for years and years, and quite enjoy working with his team. They're very professional. So let me pull up my screen. Okay, let me find that. Let me go back here, shut this down. Okay. I may need a little help from Karen here.
There should be a green button at the bottom of your screen that says share screen, or a bar if you hover kind of.
On the, just a minute, bear with me. On the Zoom webinar one?
Yes, so where
yes, I got it. We're there.
Yeah.
Okay. You can see this, people?
Yes, we can.
Okay, let me get to full screen. Bear with me here. Okay. So as I said, I just addressed the concerns. As a little overview, there was a couple of other concerns I won't really address. The request for the ban of any pesticide application control, LDD, that is the council's choice or municipal choice. I would recommend against that. You box yourself into a corner. I've gone through this before in other jurisdictions. Impact upon honeybees, I'll talk about that. Of course, I understand it's an iconic species because of the history, which is interesting, but really doesn't help deal with the science. Impact of songbirds, especially chickadees. I ferreted through some of my research and found a paper specifically on chickadees and LDD. The statement the BTK programs are ineffective, that is absolutely not true. And there were a couple of things in the petition that sort of alleged that the content that provincial agencies, non-government organizations, federal and provincial parks would be in support of the petition and would not want any BTK sprayed. In fact, the opposite is quite true. BTK has been around for 100 years. Commercialized in the 30s as an old wettable powder, but really it came on board in the 60s, and it's all tied in with Silent Spring and the race to replace DDT. It is produced the same way you would make whiskey or beer, through fermentation, a bit like yogurt. It's scaled up much larger into 100,000 liter vessels, 30,000 gallons, 25,000 gallons, and it comes out as a powder or liquid for various crops. You may want a powder or a dry formulation for a couple acres of bok choy or broccoli or something, or for forestry, you usually deal with the liquid formulations.
If I may interrupt for a moment, yes. I don't know if you realize your screen is not scrolling through as you are speaking.
Okay. Do you see the BTK general? Oh. Do you see this?
We see the cover page.
Huh.
And then of course on the left-hand side, we're seeing the various pages that we would have thought you would have scrolled to.
Yeah, I see them on mine, but bear with me here.
You're probably sharing, do you have multiple screens, Stephen?
Yes, I see myself and Peter.
Yeah, so you're probably sharing, if you stop sharing for a second.
Okay.
And then when you go to share, you can select the specific screen that you want to share versus the document.
So this would be, oh, I've got several screens here, I see. And I'm gobbling up my screen too. Can you, now, do you see this? What do you see? Yeah.
We still see the same, just the PowerPoint slide open. Not in presentation mode.
Okay, bear with me, folks. Okay, I'm going to back right out of this, and then new share. Stop share. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see, people?
So we just see the Zoom screen now. So when you go to share, is your PowerPoint ready to go?
Yes.
So when you go to share, select the exact screen that has the presentation on it the way you want us to see it.
Okay.
You'll have little options.
Okay, I'm gonna go back up. Share screen. Okay, I see way too many screens here. So let me.
You know what your screen numbers are?
I see. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 here. Let me.
I've seen this happen.
It's the only screen
from a PowerPoint presentation. You can open it as a PDF.
Let me just check that I don't have anything else open. No. Okay.
Do you know which one of those screens, 1 through 4, has the PowerPoint on it?
It all shows the. It all shows the same. My presentation.
Okay. Do you want to pick one?
Maybe we can all be emailed the presentation so we can just follow along.
Yeah, it's on the agenda.
Yeah, see, we have the screens on our agenda.
Okay, can we do it with, I'm sorry about this.
No,
people.
That's okay.
I can see it on my screen, okay. So I'm on, I'll ask for more than 9 minutes. My apologies for the technical hiccup.
We do make allowances for technical challenges.
Thank you, thank you. So I've moved on to the second page in answer to the concerns. And while we're on that, that's a general introduction. I'll refer to the safety. I didn't talk too much about the safety because that was not really raised as an issue, but an answer to the question concerning impact on other species. It's only, as Dan said, to Lepidopteras and caterpillars of moths and butterflies, and only in the right space and the right time. So people bring up about monarchs and that. There's no impact because monarchs, as you know, rely upon milkweed, and that's a July, August plant, and that's when you see the monarchs. So you'll see people worried about the monarchs and will often refer to the fact that BTK is a broad spectrum against Lepidoptera species. So BTK was discovered 100 years ago, and it's produced commercially. There's several companies around the world that produce it. I worked with Valent Bioscience. It was at Abbott Labs at one point in time. If you can make biotics, and if you can make this, if you can make antibiotics, it's the same process. How does it work? If you flip to that, I only have one image in here. There's spores and crystals in there. And the difference between BTK or this type of bacteria and all the bacteria you have in your hands or any on the surface, it has this unique ability to produce these crystals. And it's the crystal that is actually the insecticide. So there's two components. Think of this like a Tylenol gel capsule. One side's a little burr-shaped organism, and that's the spore for sporulation or reproduction. And the other is these crystals. And it looks like two pyramids, butt to butt. There's a variety of crystals in there, they have different characteristics. And when the caterpillar eats the droplet, it will consume the bacteria, which includes the spores and the crystals. Basically, the caterpillar dies of ulcers. It's a bit like a lock and key. So these crystals go into the stomach, and it's not a physical issue, but it actually sets up an enzymatic reaction, and it perforates the stomach lining, if you will. And the stomach contents bleed off into the circulatory system, and they quit feeding right away. So these toxins, an important thing about the toxins, if you're not careful how you make the BTK, you can produce some toxins that are toxic to things other than caterpillar pests. Those are called exotoxins. They're inside toxins, endo and exo. Some of the comments that Ms. Loudon has in there refer to some products made in second and third world countries that do not have the same regulatory conditions when the products are made, and those tend to be broad spectrum, but biologically produced insecticides. So there's a half a dozen different BT type insecticides that are used. If you have a lunch today, a salad, you will eat BTK. It is, whether you buy it at Farm Boy or Safeway or Loblaws, it's on all the produce that we eat. So I've included, for your reference there, some of the other products or the other types of bacteria. We don't have to go through that. But these are all products that are out there and Valent Biosciences and others make. So I mentioned, if you flip, you see the two types of toxins. That's the critical thing. That's highly regulated here in the Western world. It's where you'll find some of the referrals to impact on bees comes from second and third world countries where their products are contaminated with these other types of toxins. So BTK has an enviable safety record. I mean, it's been used at Camp David as required for gypsy moth, Andrews Air Force Base, Langley, a lot of highly sensitive places in the Northeast US. There's all sorts of studies. The references that I've given you, you'll see there's 4 there. One of those books is about 350 pages, of which over half is just lists of references. So it's a widely studied product. It's considered highly researched and a very good safety record. We're not allowed to call a product safe anymore because that's a subjective quality, but it's minimal to zero risk. That's why it's used as it is. There's no buffer zones. You can use it in cottage country, around lake shores, wherever. You can use it in and around bee yards. This is the first time actually I've ever had a beekeeper challenge the use of BTK in 40 plus years. It's used on food crops same day you eat it. That's why I mentioned about the salads. It's certified organic here in Canada, the US, and in Europe as well. Dan showed you the copy of the certificate that used that. Does it work? Absolutely. That's why it's used. You've seen it in the past. It is very, very effective. It is not a cheap product to produce or to apply, but it works very well. And because it's used widely, there's all sorts of data to support that, but I didn't go into that. That's not really required. It's been used here in Ontario, and these are programs that I've been involved with. The tent caterpillar, which you've all seen before, jack pine and spruce pine butterm. You've had problems with jack pine butterm along Georgian Bay in the past. The gypsy moth or Lymantria dispar, LDD, oak leaf shredder. We did that around at Wenda Park one year. Satin moth and spruce butterm. There'll be about 100,000 hectares, 250,000 acres of spruce butterm in northeastern Ontario this year. There's a page on references. I come from a science background, and that's where I live. So these are the 4 books that are the 4 references that I picked to address the concerns. A global one from World Health. There's some statements from it. And the last one is some work that was done under contract to Ministry of the Environment back in the 90s. Basically looking at the impact of BTK in watersheds due to all the spraying for gypsy moth and budworm. And it was done under contract to some professors at University of Guelph. So I picked these documents, and you can always pick arguments. I mean, that's what lawyers do and scientists even. But I just went through them and picked the summary statements. So this is what the World Health states about it. Owing to the specific mode of action, BTK products are unlikely to pose any hazards to humans or other vertebrates, or to a great extent, or to the great majority of non-targeted invertebrates. They may be used safely for the control of insect pests of agricultural, horticultural crops, as well as forests. The Ontario Ministry of Environment publication. The use of BTK does not present a detectable impact on the quality of surface waters in the province of Ontario. There's about 40 pages to get to that conclusion, but that's what it is. The one book, which is sort of my Bible, my Quran, Clare and O'Callaghan, that's one I mentioned that has all the references. And this book was written in response to some spraying in New Zealand, where properties were sprayed as many as 50 times over a 7-month period. Overall, direct impacts have not led to significant problems. Yes, there can be reduction in other caterpillars if they are in the treatment area during that period of time, but most of them aren't. And birds that feed on them, there can be reduction in food sources, but birds tend to be opportunists and they will search elsewhere for food. You can see here that their conclusion is BT-based products, when they're used, safe to use in terms of minimal impact on non-target insects, little residual activity, and lack of mammalian toxicity. There's an 800+ page document from the Forest Service, and I pulled the parts out of it, and that is a national document that all state and federal programs have to abide by. It's an environmental impact statement. And I pulled out the section on honeybees. You can see this here. I've identified that, and they indicate that there's really no impact on honeybees. In fact, BTK, not so much now because of the differences in market conditions and that. BTK as a powder in the early days was often bought by beekeepers and sprinkled into the tops of their supers, the beehives, to control wax moths. So beekeepers have used this product for 40 years, 50 years. It's being changed to a different type of BT, not the BTK. There's another BT Iazawa that's a little more effective, but it's still a BT-based product. So beekeepers use these products and they're quite happy to. So the fact that it has an impact or is stated to have an impact, there's only one paper that's out there, and that is one paper done by one scientist in California, and nobody can find that paper anymore. And it keeps being referred to in all the publications, but nobody can find it. So the Forest Service, in fact, you'll see on my page on BTK and honeybees, states that the observation made by Atkins is based on a single study and should not be subject to overinterpretation. And as a student, I worked for the Feds, Environment Canada, and we had a full-time beekeeper, and every pesticide that was used was tested on bees, and there was no impact on beehives. We'd put them out a month in advance of the treatment areas, collect the honey, analyze it. There was never any impact from the BTK products. So impact on chickadees, that is not correct at all, same as bees. A lot of birds don't eat gypsy moth. It's physically difficult for them. These long hairs, the hairs are irritating. When they get larger, they wiggle. They're tough for a bird to grab onto. There's only a couple of towhees and a couple of cuckoos that actually feed on them. The fact that in the petition says that chickadees need 1,000 caterpillars, well, they tend to be omnivorous. They will eat any insects or seeds, whatever's available. So the implication that spraying BTK will have an impact on chickadees is not correct at all. There's no relationship. It can have an impact on if you reduce a lot of the food sources with BTKs and other things that are not necessarily LDD, but other insects that are maybe later in the season, where there's other caterpillar pests out there. If there are other caterpillars, if there are other birds feeding on those caterpillars, bringing them back to the young, it can have a short-term impact that season. And it's the same as if there are other minor species of leps that are impacted, they usually bounce back the following year. So what they found is that there may be, you can record smaller fledglings, either in the numbers or the size, but it's not significant to the population. And you're only looking at spraying for 1 or 2 seasons. Impact upon songbirds in general, according to the US government, and this is a study, they've done it twice. In general, no adverse effects on songbird populations in terms of species richness. In other words, it doesn't reduce the numbers. They don't go elsewhere because you're killing off some gypsy moth. And the relative abundance of songbirds because of despite the decrease in insect and caterpillar populations. So in general, there's no significant impact on songbirds. So those are the 4 points that I wanted to address in the petition. I appreciate the passion of the author, but it's not based on science. And I've not seen that coming from beekeepers in the past, where they say that the BTK is ineffective and it has an effect on bees, because it's blatantly not correct. So that's tried to get into my 9 minutes. My apologies for the technical issues. If there's any questions, I'd entertain them if you have time.
All right, thank you very much. And I wonder if I could ask you to stop sharing your screen.
Will do.
Unfortunately, it never was quite successful just going through, but I think we got the message nonetheless. And we'll start with Councillor Jarvis, please. Councillor Jarvis, you're muted.
Yeah, I am muted. Sorry, and thank you for the presentation, Stephen. It's easy to follow on another screen ourselves, so I think we're okay. I do have a question for you, and that's with regards to, in your slide presentation, under BTK, 2 types of toxins, you list endotoxins as being the ones that have no mammalian toxicity, yes, and targeted insecticidal activity. And then at the bottom of that same presentation, you indicate reports of adverse effects upon pollinators are usually associated with the use of these endotoxin-containing products. Is that a typo?
That would be a very bad typo. Sorry. Yeah, thank you.
Just trying to help you out with that.
Yeah,
so you have more successful presentations from here on in.
Thank you. Apologies on that. So just make a note of that, folks, or I will send out for, actually, Karen, if you distribute this, I will update that and send that back. And thank you for picking that up.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from any of the councillors? Councillor Hazelton, please.
Yes, Stephen, thank you very much for that very in-depth presentation. It's nice to get access to details, facts on this matter. You made one comment that I thought was interesting, and I'd just like you to explore it a little bit. You said that if I'm eating salad today, I'm going to be digesting BTK. Could you help me understand that?
So BTK is widely used because of its organics status. It's the go-to product for most produce producers. So any of the lettuce that's grown in California, they will use other products, but it's the only insecticide that you can harvest the same day and consume. Everything else has a re-entry interval as well as a days to harvest interval. So some of the chemical insecticides may be 2 weeks after you spray before you can harvest that crop. So it's the only product. And if you go to Farm Boy, and this came out of some work we did when we sprayed the city of Vancouver in 1992, I worked with some people at UBC, and they swabbed, they went into the local greengrocers as well as Safeway and the local big chains, and they swabbed vegetables in all of those different types of retail outlets, and they all had BTK on them. And they could actually one of the scientists could actually determine which type of BTK, or which he thought he could tell by the way the crystals were, whether it was a dipel or a 4A or whatever. I didn't challenge him on that, but they could find it anywhere. So yes, it's ubiquitous. It's used on products every day when they're growing. Quite
Thank
common.
you for that. So one thing that we often hear when we go to the grocery store is, even though they may be fresh groceries, there is generally a comment that you should wash your vegetables before you eat them. If you wash your vegetables, does that wash off the BTK?
Yes, it will. We do that in our own household just because BTK is not the only thing that they use. So we just have a little, I don't know, you can use Dawn or diluted something that doesn't have a lot of surfactants, but I think my wife buys a little vegetable spray or something and just give a shot to things if, you know, if we're going to have a salad. So yeah, that will do that. But it is commonly used, and not just, I mean, in food. The one thing I didn't dwell on too much, I mentioned, but it's the assumption that the parks people don't support this. It's been sprayed in the provincial parks around the Muskokas, Wenda, Grundy, 6 Mile. Federal parks use it. All parks people say they don't like to, but it's not against their law or their policy. They will use it as required. So there's a list there of various, and those are all parks that I've been involved with, which is most of the spraying. I usually get there one way or the other, but yeah. So it's commonly used in food, and it is used by parks people to control these forest insects when it gets into their parks and causes concerns for their day use areas and extreme defoliation. One of the things I wanted to mention, and this is to do with the oaks, and my whole life has been forest health, and I spent a lot of time in oak forests. So gypsy moth has a huge impact, and as you've seen, and it takes a couple of years for these trees to die, and a couple of years of defoliation. It basically, it's like Mother Hubbard went to the cupboard. It reduces the reserves. The defoliation takes the reserves, the starch out of the roots, and it can do that once or twice. And you'll see this last year, there was a great refoliation in July and August because there's so much moisture. Here where I live, big, massive old oaks that were totally stripped. You could not tell in August. Usually you can, but they came right back because we had so much moisture, at least in this part of the province. Just across the bay in Michigan, there's a pest coming across that will cause huge impact on our oak forests in Ontario. Keeping your oaks healthy is important. So there's it's a fungal pathogen. It's not an insect. It's more difficult to control, but it's not too far from the border. Your pests actually came from Michigan. Michigan will spray about 100,000 plus acres this year, and they did last year. They had over 1 million acres defoliated a couple of years ago, and these caterpillars show up in the spring breezes, the spring winds, and you'll often find them on the northeast sides of lakes or in bays, you know, on the north shore of Georgian Bay, Honey Harbor, places like that. That's where they'll first land when they blow in on these spring winds. So you'll see there'll probably be some more blow-ins this year, and then it's important to try and keep those oaks alive and healthy because there's further pests coming, knocking at the door, and they're more significant than the gypsy moth. Gypsy moth's only here. These are temporal concerns. They're significant, but it's important to try and do something about it.
Thank you. Could I just ask one more question?
Sure may.
The couple of my residents have expressed to me concerns that the impact of defoliation, in other words, they tell me about broad swaths of their shoreline or their properties being defoliated, and then they tell me that they believe that has a very significant impact on the population of birds and other insects and other things like that. And I'm not sure you spoke much about that. Have there been any studies done to help us understand that impact?
Absolutely. And as I said, I just sort of tried to address the petition's 4 major points. Once you reduce a component, a significant component of your woodland, other species will come in, but it also changes the whole ecosystem. And a great example, if you're all aware of the emerald ash borer, there's some work done by the Environment or Canadian Forest Service down near Chatham, where they took one of the early arrivals of emerald ash borer in a small riparian area, or a small stream, little creek, like a little municipal park area. And it was mostly an ash forest around this little stream. And a lot of the ash died, so they were felled. So that once you lose the canopy in the shade, it grew up to garlic mustard and all sorts of other invasive species and natural species that came up. And it changed the quality of water in the stream because there's no more oaks to shade it, or sorry, no more ash to shade it. So the stream becomes warmer, more potential for algal bloom, changes the species. A lot of the small shiners and that, they don't do well in warm waters. In fact, in some areas we've sprayed, over the years, we've sprayed just along rivers, just 1 or 2 swaths along the river, just to keep that shoreline green. It's a visual thing, and also it helps maintain the integrity of that water system. So once you take out something like those big oaks, there's other trees that will come in to replace them, but it does alter the mix of species, terrestrial and potentially aquatic, in that immediate area. So,
thank you.
Yeah. And I just use the ash as a more current example. Yeah,
all right.
There's a big impact on it for sure.
I don't know if there's any other councillors with any comments. I have one aside, if you will allow me, plus one question. And one aside is, I've heard from both Mr. Haupt and our clerk's department that in future, one of the easier ways to share your screen with a PowerPoint presentation is actually to save it as a PDF and then share the PDF.
Yeah.
So if you had to do this again, that's the recommendation I've heard from a couple of people today.
Okay. My apologies. This is my first time, not with the Zoom or with the Microsoft Teams. This is my first time where I've had a technical challenge. So,
well, okay. I just want to share that. But my question,
thank you for that. Yes.
Is, and you know, I'm no scientist, so please, I apologize for my confusion. But I heard from the prior presentation, and perhaps from yourself as well, that the aerial spray affects the canopies of the trees. Yeah. And in my experience, at least on my property, it seems the caterpillars are starting from the bottom, they're crawling up the tree, and they tend to eat on their way up. And so I'm wondering, does that mean that the caterpillars are destroying much of the lower tree before they reach the canopy where the poison is? And I thought it had a short shelf life. So I'd appreciate your comment on that, what I'm missing. No. And maybe I'm just only observing part of what's really going on.
Well, number one, you're very observant. 2, insects have evolved over time to develop certain strategies for feeding and survival. So the gypsy moth egg masses are laid down low. Other things like the spruce butterman, those egg masses are high in the canopy. So they're already at their feeding sites. But the gypsy moth egg masses are down low, usually within 10 feet, or you'll see them on the bottoms of the large scaffold limbs, as we call them. And then when the eggs hatch, the first meal is they will eat the actual egg case. And then when they're those L1s, not much bigger than a hair, they'll start to migrate up and down, and they'll do a daily run, if you will, out looking, searching for foliage, or before the foliage is there, they'll go out to the tips of the twigs, spin down on their little webs, their little strand of silk, and blow in the wind. So that's a dispersal mechanism, and that is part of that moving up into the treetops. Also, most of the foliage will start to bud where it's most exposed. The foliage will start to flush, and that's usually at the top of the canopy. So that's where the foliage will usually start first. But often with oaks, they're in a larger, in your case, on a stream side or lakeside, you're going to see lower canopies flush more quickly because they'll be exposed to the sun. So in that situation, the larvae won't have to travel as far. They'll feed at the lower canopies, but in most forests where the oak is a climax species or one of the taller, later trees, older trees, most of the canopy, most of the foliage is at the top. And that's traditionally the way it is. If you see where these insects came from in the Caucasus in Eastern Europe, it's big old oak and beech trees with very little undergrowth. So the caterpillars over millennium, over millions of years, have developed the ability to just seek out that new foliage. And mostly it is at the top. So they'll go back and forth. And that's why people use banding trees and that to intercept them, to detour them. It's because they have that unique behavior where they migrate up and down. Once, after a couple instars, after they've molted, shed their skin a couple times, they stay in the canopies and they eat. They become a 24/7 eating machine. And each one will eat a square foot of foliage a day.
Thank you very much for that. That's kind of very interesting.
Okay, well, thank you for the question.
Any other councillor want to have any final question? Councillor Wojcik.
Yeah, just quickly, and thanks for the presentation. And you being a scientist and believing in the science, could you tell us any negative effects of BTK? Because obviously you're not a proponent of it, you're a scientist, and there must be some sort of negative impacts. And I'd just like to know what your thoughts are.
Okay. Negative impact is it does kill caterpillars, period. And people are concerned about the, not so much here because we don't have those, like using the example of the monarch, it's not here when we're spraying gypsy moth. But when we're working in Indiana and places farther south, which is an earlier generation of monarchs, the monarchs we see here are usually the third, if not the fourth generation from when they leave Mexico. So farther south where they control gypsy moth, there can be a conflict. And in fact, they're working to deal with that in a couple of states about trying to avoid treating fence lines in farm fields and stuff like that. But that's an eradication program where they're after a different thing. So there's that. Some people react to the BTK, not to the BTK, but to the spray. And we see that. I never argue with that. I'm not a doctor, but it's very rare that somebody does. I've literally been sprayed dozens of times with it. I try not to because it's a hygiene thing more than, for me, a safety issue. It's stinky, it's sticky, you know, so we say, don't be out in it. It is very short-lived in the air. I mean, it just lands quickly. And then once it's on the trees, it dries and then it doesn't, there's no vapors that come off. It doesn't volatilize and cause other problems. But people will complain about it. There was a concern with children and asthma. Did it increase the onset of childhood asthma? So there was a study done in 1992 93, we sprayed the city of Victoria, and the local regional health people ran a study, and they looked at asthma patients inside and outside of the treatment areas and found no incidence of an increase in the onset of childhood asthma. That's always a concern. There's no issues with pregnancy, no issues with cancer. No issues of any impact on none of the other mammals, fish, aquatics, which is why it has the safety record that it does have. The downside is it tends to be expensive. A lot of producers ag people don't like to use it because it's effective, but it's not good enough for them because they can use a chemical insecticide or certain types of insect growth regulators, and they can use it on 4 or 5. They can use it on beetles. They can use it on, 4 or 5 different insect pests. This works on caterpillars, and that's it. So that's a downside for wider use in some areas. Because other major pests like potato beetles, this does nothing for it. There is a BTT, there is a BT compound that works on potato beetles, but growers don't like it. It doesn't work quickly enough compared to the chemicals. So, but impacts on mammals, no. Humans, no. If somebody is immunocompromised, if we know of it, we'll tell the program managers, if there's people call and complain, just ask them to go to Tim Hortons for the morning, go buy them a coffee. Just don't be in their home or stay inside during the period of application. It's more of often in those situations, we'll see people will get, and this has been scientifically done, not only are there scientific papers on the impact, people actually develop tussicosis or like hives in response to the toxins in the hairs of the gypsy moth and other types of that family, some processionary moths and that. There's also some papers done on how people will get so upset about the spraying that they will get themselves in such a state that they will get stressed, and it has some psychological impacts on them. It's kind of rare, but it does happen. People are very passionate about not spraying, tend to follow that on occasion. But for most people, 99.99 whatever percent, there's no impact.
Okay.
So, which is why it's used same day of harvest. It has the easiest regulations, or the less stringent regulations of any pesticide that's out there. And one final thing, one thing about the specificity. When I started as a student, people say, "Why are you using chemicals? We want BT." Now I see the next generation going, "That stuff is, yeah, we want virus." So they're going to treat an area in Toronto with the virus this spring. It works, but not. So there's an assumption that it's like a pandemic. That it will kill all other insects? No. And all other caterpillars? It does not. It's specific to the gypsy moth and only those that consume it, but it doesn't run through a population. It's just those that are in the immediate area. And it does nothing about defoliation. The only reason we're really spraying is to keep the foliage on the trees. If we could come up with a better way, a different way, we would. And that, I'm afraid the people in Toronto are going to find that out, that they're going to get defoliated and pay a lot more for the virus. We just, my experience with it is just use it in areas of threatened and endangered species of caterpillar species. Save it for those areas, but those people, I'm afraid, will be sorely disappointed in the results. So, if you have people that are suggesting that you go with that, and it's not that I'm promoting BTK, it's just that they will be disappointed as property owners when they see their caterpillars or their leaves coming off their trees.
Let's go to Councillor Wiancko, please.
Well, thanks, Stephen and Dan, for your presentations. I think that's what we really needed, was the science behind the BT work and so on. I guess the question is to our staff, and is council going to make a decision on the spraying in our township sometime in the next little while? What's the schedule or status of that?
Ms. Gunby, welcome to our meeting this morning.
Oh, I've been here the whole time.
Okay, but we haven't seen you, have we?
No. So through your worship, I have to fix my lighting clearly in my room, my living room here, but so staff were directed to research it, and I think it's going to be coming back, I would say March at the latest.
Okay.
But as of these results, or as of these presentations today, council do not make any decisions based on delegations.
Okay, well, I'm going to say thank you very much, Mr. Nicholson and Mr. Haupt, for your presentations. I think, I know I am, and I think I speak for all of council, or certainly more informed than we were initially, and greatly appreciate it. And we will carry on now with the rest of our meeting, but we appreciate you taking time early Monday morning to share this information with us. Thank you.
Thank you for your indulgence. Appreciate the time.
All right. The next item on our agenda is the consent agenda. And I have in front of me, moved by Councillor Hazelton, second by Councillor Bocek. Be it resolved, the council adopts the consent agenda of January 10th, 2022 as circulated. I'm seeing hands up, so we may have to amend this. I'll start with Councillor Jarvis, followed by Councillor Bocek, please.
My apologies on this. I had a question for Councillor Wiancko with regards to the Inland Water Quality Program report, which is item I. Could we just pull that for a brief question?
Certainly.
Thank you.
Councillor Bocek.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Mayor, your eyes were down when I had my hand up. My comment is about the previous item and a question of clarity. Is council considering allowing residents to spray BDTs, or is council considering the township getting involved in spraying?
Ms. Gunby.
Thank you. Through your worship, the township is not considering anything at this time. Council directed staff to go back and research the possibilities and obtain legal opinions and information to bring back to council. And at that time, council will make a decision whether they want to either ban pesticides, ban BTK. I know that the council in the past have stated that they do not want to be involved in the spraying. But again, staff are going to be coming back with recommendations for you to consider. Like I said, March at the latest.
Thank you.
Councillor Hazelton.
Just like to make a note that there are many residents who are in the process of the registration for this aerial spraying, are paying money for the aerial spraying to lock in this service. And as the days progress in January and February into March, the saturation, if you will, of those interested and completing their process and paying for this service will continue at a massive rate. And if we are going to have any disruptive decisions, that needs to be made immediately, not in February, but immediately. There are already hundreds of residents who have already paid for the service, as is the process that these companies are going through. And I'm not sure.
But at this point, I was not planning on entertaining a discussion or a decision on this because we just received the delegations, but your point has been heard. Councillor Wiancko.
I got the same point. I can't see what staff would come back with any other recommendation but approval of the BT. So I'm ready to vote on it today. I think it's a waste of time for staff to go back and consider both options. I think it's quite clear that the science indicates that it's no problem. So I'm willing to vote on it today if other councillors are.
I'm going to go Councillor Douglas, followed by Councillor Gunby, followed by Clerk Way.
Thank you. I'm in agreement with Council Hazelton and Wiancko. This program started with this company in this area on my lake, especially months and months ago, like back in the summertime, and many people have already registered and paid for it. So I think the sooner the better. I don't think we need another report on it personally. Thank you.
CEO Gunby.
Thank you, Your Worship. The resolution states, be it resolved that council directs staff to report back regarding the authority to ban aerial spraying and regulation of pesticides and the impacts to all pollinators. That is what the resolution states, and that is what would be coming towards you for discussion.
Clerk Way. You're muted, Clerk Way.
Sorry. From a procedural standpoint, we don't have a resolution or a staff report to make this decision currently on the agenda. We have yet to approve. I guess my question is, how would you like to proceed? I know Ms. Gunby has read the previous direction, but right now we're kind of swaying from procedure at this point in time. And I would just like to pause before we do something we're not permitted to do. But I'm not sure what direction you're looking to go in at this point.
I think what we need to do is when the regular agenda comes up for approval, we may have a councillor suggest that a certain item be added to it. And I think we need 2/3 agreement from the council if we're going to add a last minute item for discussion, or could you correct me on that? I got it. I saw ahead. Okay, good. Councillor Cooper, did you want to add anything to this?
Yes, just the old principle of keep it simple, stupid. What if we just, we can add it to our agenda, but I'm suggesting that whether we'd be probably wise just to not approve or disapprove. In other words, let people do what they want to do and stay out of it. So that would be my recommendation. Thank you.
Well, in simple terms, we have 3 options. One is do the spraying ourselves, and I don't think there's an appetite for that. Second is ban anybody from spraying, and we don't know yet because we haven't voted on it what the appetite is for that. And the third option is to do neither of those and basically let individuals take care of themselves. But so what I'm suggesting to everyone, because I don't want to get totally off track here, is when we come to the regular agenda, if any councillor has an appetite for voting on this today, that they raise it as a new business, and if 2/3 of the council agrees that it's worth discussing, then we'll discuss it under new business later today. And with that, any other comments on the consent agenda? Councillor Bocek.
I too would like to have the item pulled on the water quality by Councillor Wiancko. So if you need a seconder on Mr. Jarvis's motion, I'd like to bring that to the floor.
All right, well, the first thing I'm going to do then, thank you, is have be it resolved the council adopts the consent agenda of January 10th, 2021 as amended to exclude item I, the report from Mr. Wiancko. All those in favor? Okay, that's passed. Oh, Clerk Way, you're not in favor?
I was just going to say, Your Worship, that if all they're doing is to have a discussion about it and then wishing to just receive it afterwards, there's no point in having separate resolutions, but that's okay.
Okay. Well, your way is probably a little slicker. So having said all that, you know, I learn something every day, and this now I've learned more today so far in this meeting than per usual. So let's keep going. I believe Councillor Jarvis, you were the first one to raise it. Can you let's have a discussion then on the Inland Water Quality Program for 2021 report. Councillor Jarvis, you will initiate that discussion.
Thank you, and I appreciate Clerk Way's comments with regards to procedure. That sort of smooths things along a little bit for us. I just have a question for Councillor Wiancko with regards to water quality in his summary, and certainly within the report itself. He talks about TP being a little higher than it's been in the trend, and I realize that this is pretty comprehensive stuff that Councillor Wiancko's been doing over the years. I really appreciate it, and I know the Inland Lake people do too. I'm just curious to know if there's any way we can determine. It's the same thing with the SSEA, I guess. We get these results that seem to indicate possibly a worrying trend. Do we have any way of finding out what's causing this, or what the reason is for the higher TP, and whether this in itself is concerning?
Councillor Wiancko.
The way I look at my study is my study is the canary in the coal mine. It's a one-off study of total phosphorus, and the reason we do it in the fall is that the lakes have been used all summer long by the residents, and you would expect with all the septic systems operating hopefully efficiently and the use of the lake, the highest levels of phosphorus in the summertime, in the late year. So one sample of phosphorus does not really indicate, it's not really a scientific study for that year, but what I have is about 20 years of data on those once a year samples, and therefore you get some kind of a trend. And with any trend in water quality, it's up and down individual years. So in my report there, you'll see the mean, the long-term means, and that's what you really got to watch is the long-term means. Are they going up or going down? And in most cases, those means are staying consistent throughout the various years. And in most cases, these means are also very similar to what the Muskoka Watershed Council is finding when they go out once every 2 or 3 years to some of these lakes. So it's nice that the cottage associations feel comfortable that somebody's looking at the water once a year and looking at the long-term trends. And if that trend's going up, then there's concerns. So they appreciate that somebody's doing something. It's minimalistic, but at least if somebody's looking at the lake once a year, and it makes them happy. As I say, it's the canary in the coal mine.
Thank you.
Just a quick follow-up, Mr. Mayor, if that's all right with you. Paul, then if you were seeing in your mind a concerning trend upwards in the means, would you be making recommendations from your observations, or would you be leaving that up to the lake associations to do?
No, I would work with the various lake associations if I found a trend. If you look at my sample locations in the various lakes, I always have one sample at what I consider the inlet of the lake. And then I have one sample at the outfall of the lake, and then maybe several points in between, or in back bays where there's not a lot of circulation. So all my sample points are very critically chosen. So if I see at the inlet, there's a low value, and at the outlet, there's a high value, then something is happening within that lake. They're adding nutrients in that lake. And this happened in Gibson Lake a few years ago, but it wasn't a long-term trend. But if it was happening in a back bay where there's higher nutrient levels, I would talk to our septic inspection people. And the same with the bacteria. If we have high E. coli, and we have in the past had high E. coli in some of the back bays in some areas, and the township has gone in and found septic systems that were failing. So again, it's a one-off, but we can still get some useful information out of there as to what's happening in that lake during the summertime.
I appreciate that, Paul. And just one quick last question. Do you make the individual reports per lake available to each of the lake associations, or would they have to come to pull this out of our records?
No, I've sent copies to all the lake associations. Some of the lakes aren't represented by associations, like Myers Lake or Gallo Lake. They're kind of road associations, but they've come to me for help. And so I never go onto a lake unless they actually want me to go on the lake. And so all these 8 individual lakes have asked me to go on the lakes once a year.
That's good work. I appreciate it. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. Councillor Douglas.
Thank you. Paul, I just wanted to say thank you for your work over the past 20 years on this, because the feedback I've gotten from my constituents is that it is greatly appreciated to have some sort of report done on the inland lakes, just to see the trend. And the association, I know on this lake especially, really appreciates seeing that, as we do have many bays, and your work has been appreciated over the years. So thank you for your work.
Thank you. Councillor Wojcik.
Yeah, Paul, I know my constituents really appreciate the work you've done and read your reports. I happen to have read your report on this agenda, and the amount of statistics in there simply boggled my mind, because there's so much, and I'm not a scientist. My question that came out of reading your report was naturally occurring additives to the water, bacteria, phosphorus, things like that. These occur naturally in bodies of water too. We know that because lakes where nobody lives on get tested and they see that these elements change. My question is to you, is there any benchmarking, or is there any baseline of data to compare your studies with government studies that were done before a lake like 6 Mile was developed or Myers Lake was developed? These lakes weren't developed that long ago, and previous to us screwing things up, there had to have been a baseline. I'm just wondering if you have any information or data on what these lakes were naturally, and that we could compare it to what it is today and what effect we've had on these lakes.
Yeah, that's a tough question. Basically, it wasn't until the last 20, 25 years that they've been able to develop the technology to look at low level phosphorus. There's only a couple of labs in Ontario now that do low level phosphorus analysis, and the one I go to is in North Bay, and the other one's at Dorset, but that's a Ministry of the Environment lab, and they don't take private samples. But I think the people I go to for the history of nutrient levels in our lake would be the Muskoka Watershed Council. Their sampling goes a little beyond my era of doing this work, so I would compare my samples with them, and I do on occasionally do that. But basically, I can say that over the 25 years I've been doing this, things have been fairly consistent. There's no one lake or one area that I would consider has become polluted as a result of development. So I can comfortably say that the levels we're finding are fairly low. As I say, anything below 10 is considered good, and there's a lot of values below 10. Below 20, it's average, and there's a lot of values between 10 and 20, and there's very few over 20. Some of the bottom waters do have that, but that's nutrients being released from the bottom waters. But the values that we're getting on inland lakes in our township are very low. And I say in my report here, the highest values we have is coming down the Severn River. And that's basically because of Lake Simcoe with all their nutrient additions and from Couchiching and so on. So we get the highest levels coming into our area from the Severn River, and most of the lakes within our township are considered fairly acceptable.
Great, thanks for your comments, Paul, I appreciate it.
Any other comments? I'm just going to add that I think we in the township are very fortunate to have Councillor Wiancko providing all this data for so many years. Certainly it is a useful report card on the health of our inland lakes. I'm going to try one more time here. And that I have moved by Councillor Hazel and seconded by Councillor Botchek. Be it resolved that Council adopts the consent agenda of January 10th, 2022 as circulated. All those in favor? And that has carried. Thank you very much. Okay. Now, were there any applicants for the open forum portion of our meeting, Ms. Way?
No, there was not.
Okay. So now we get past all these other pages that had to talk about the things that we passed. And I have in front of me a motion that is moved by Councillor Wiancko, seconded by Councillor Botchek. Be it resolved that Council adopts the regular agenda of January 10th, 2022 as circulated. Are there anyone wish to make any amendments? Councillor Jarvis.
Yes, quickly, for several meetings now, for a while now, we've been, we show the council action items tracker on the agenda. There's never any discussion on it. I do have a few comments I want to make. Can we cover that today, or how would we handle that?
Yes, because it is an item on our agenda. It can be discussed when we get to that item.
I'd like to, thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or additions, changes? Councillor Hazelton.
As per the discussion we had a few minutes ago regarding the LDD moth spraying program, I would like us to add an agenda item that allows us to address that topic.
All right, so I will call that item 13B because I believe we have already one item under new business, and item 13B, and that will be the LLD, or is it LDD?
LDD.
You know, LDD moth spraying. All right, I've added that to the agenda. And I'm writing a note right on the agenda, so hopefully I won't forget, and I'm sure you will remind me if I do. Any other comments with regards to our regular agenda? Then I'm going to call all those in favor. Oh, sorry, Councillor Botchek, was that a comment or a vote?
No, earlier we talked about adding to the regular agenda the some sort of resolution about the approval of allowing spraying in our township. No, can we add that as a?
That's just what Councillor Hazelton just did.
So, okay, sorry, Councillor Hazelton, I didn't realize. So it is about whether we're going to discuss whether we're going to allow people to spray in our township.
I believe so. I think that's Councillor Hazelton's intention.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
With that clarification, all those in favor? And the regular agenda is approved, is adopted as amended. So now we get to discuss our communications and our activities of the past month. And I'm going to go in reverse alphabetical order because last month we went in alphabetical order. So we're going to start with Councillor Wiancko, please.
Obviously, it's been a quiet time during the holidays. One issue that I've had a number of phone calls and emails on is the damage that's being done on some of our trails around here with the ATVs and mud trucks. Snowmobile trails up in our area here really got hammered this year with those with these vehicles. And now I'm hearing some of our walking trails up here that people have legitimately built and actually have Ministry of Natural Resources permission to build are now being damaged by these ATVs. And I don't know if there's anything we can do because it's on Crown land. So I'm not sure there's anything we can do because I don't think the Ministry of Natural Resources is going to get involved in it, but something I'm looking into anyway. And it's concerning, but between that and a few other calls on roads and so on, that's about it.
Oh, all right, thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
Well, that's a long shot between W and J, isn't it? Yeah, not much going on.
In between.
Besides praying a lot for snow, which we finally got up here in Collingwood. Again, a quiet period here as well. I did take that time to do the 4 Seasons of Reconciliation course that had been recommended to us through, I believe, our CAO and sponsored by I think it's RBC. Very interesting course and well worth taking. And I'd recommend it for those that haven't had a look at it yet. That did not take that long to get through, and you can do more than is required if you wish. Other than that, Committee of Adjustment, Library Board as well. Library's struggling a bit because finding a CAO in this day and age right now where people seem to be able to pick and choose the jobs they want more so than ever before, I guess, with COVID upon us, has made it rather difficult for us to get a CAO or CEO, excuse me. The libraries have gone into a pickup mode. They've had to close down because of recommendations from the health, Department of Health. Also unfortunate, especially for the local community in the wintertime. It's one of those things you just have to make a decision on and go with it. So that's what's been going on there. I don't know if Al can add anything in the library when he gets to it, but that's been it for my my month.
Can I ask everybody else to go ahead in their reverse alphabetical order? And that would be Councillor Hazelton, followed by Douglas, followed by Cooper, followed by Bochek, please.
Thank you. So the past month has been interesting, although it might have been a time for family recreation and family visits. Apparently not so much. Certainly no rest for a councillor in our township. Lots of matters that are continuing to be front and center. So I've had many calls and emails with residents and others since our December meeting. And these have covered topics such as the dark sky lighting matter, fireworks restrictions, the noise bylaw update, and the spraying for LDD moths. So those are key hot topics that continue to surface, including Sunday morning phone calls where people are trying to get a handle on what's going on. So as I say, no rest for a councillor. Stephen brought up the fact that we are having a bit of a challenge filling our CEO role on the township library. I had thought we had an ideal candidate. Sadly, she chose not to accept the offer. So we're pretty much back to square one. We are searching for a library education certified CEO. That brings the matter to be a bit more challenging. And one of the strategies that I would like us to be able to do, and hopefully we can leverage the work that is being done at the township searching for a CAO, where we are retaining a search firm. Perhaps that same search firm could help us find a CEO for the library. I know that they work in that space, and perhaps they can bring value to that. Perhaps we can have a township program on that as opposed to kind of a separate. Additionally, over the last month, I've been doing some research on the Indigenous history. I did not take the course that Councillor Jarvis mentioned, but I was rummaging around on the Indigenous side of things, and I learned, I think, that we have the Canadian Indigenous Historical Timeline poster on the wall in our council chambers. And I saw that and I thought, well, that's really interesting. I'd like to actually read it, but of course can't go to the office. And so I decided to chase that one down, and I found that there's a Indigenous fellow by the name of Alan Sutherland, who is the author. And so I reached out to him and I discovered that I could buy my own mini poster, which I did. But more important than the poster was the package of over 130 pages of textual history that can complement that poster. I don't know if we have that available within the township, but if we do, I would very much recommend that that package of historical information be made available to all of us as councillors and to staff as we go about seeking to fully understand the historical activities that have taken place with the Indigenous community and kind of where we are on this road to truth and reconciliation. So I don't know if staff can look into that, but I've been finding it, first of all, it's 130 pages, a lot of reading. There's no pictures, it's just a lot of history, but it's very fascinating and very educational. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hazelton, and thank you for that reference to that wall poster that we have that very sadly for almost 2 years now, nobody's been looking at it. It's very unfortunate. I would like to go now to Councillor Douglas, please.
You're muted, Councillor Douglas.
Sorry. Okay, thank you for that. Just further to Councillor Hazelton's remarks on the Indigenous reconciliation. I'm fortunate enough to have family who represents, from a legal perspective, some of the Indigenous community, as well as a chief who is located out in Western Canada. There is a book that is very interesting, and I'll try and get my hands on it and get the name, and I'll bring that up in the next meeting, actually, maybe for people that might be interested in that. The month was surprisingly quite busy. I mean, being the holiday season, I was quite surprised at the calls I was getting. Some on the previous meeting, of course, on fireworks, dark skies, and the BTK. But also, as Councillor Wiancko was getting, I've had a lot of calls on the ATVs within our trail system. I can tell you firsthand, as someone who grooms the trails out on this part of the lake, they're destroyed, absolutely destroyed. So it is Crown land. I have done a little bit of research on that. Because it's Crown land, MNRF has no jurisdiction or will take no stance on it. It is for everyone to use, and I would agree with that. But maybe we can talk at some point about how we can get the ATV community to contribute to repairing the damage that they do to the trails. I think there are people willing, but again, it's always about how to organize these people. Aside from that, I just had a lot of conversations with constituents, just seasonal greetings and well-wishing for 2022. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper, please.
Thank you, Mayor Kutzir. Yeah, one would think that this would have been a quiet time, but I didn't find my last month particularly quiet, and but thankful that there's been a lot of interaction with the community around a variety of different issues that have been on our radar recently, and including things like noise and a number of other things, fireworks, etc. So that's what kept me busy, along with a lot of calls on other issues. And I also took a fair bit of time. It wasn't easy to get traction on this, but I've been working very closely with Dr. Vranek on the Education Center feasibility study. A little tough to get a hold of people to consult with on the feasibility, so especially over the holidays. And with COVID, so there's just, you know, it's not happening quite as quickly as I'd like to see, but that's me. I'm always pushing too hard. So hopefully we will have some more information in due course. I've certainly referred a number of people, called a number of people and referred a number of people to Dr. Vranek to act as a source for the feasibility study, educators and so forth. So that was that. And I think the only other, I think that's pretty much it, other than I'd like to compliment Councillor Hazelton and actually reading a book without pictures. That's really quite remarkable. Thank you.
I wonder if Councillor Hazelton will let you get away with that. But carrying on quickly, Councillor Bocek, please.
Thank you, Mayor Coetzee. Fairly busy month. 6 Mile Lake. Lots of communications up on 6 Mile Lake with constituents and cottage associations, mainly the 6 Mile Lake Cottage Association and their new president, Harold. I'm not even going to attempt the last name. Paul, you might tell us what it is later, but it's quite a hard one. Mainly about zoning bylaws and changes. Seems like we're moving in a very positive direction between the two associations up there. And I'm very happy for one to see things moving forward in a positive manner. Oak Bay, quite a bit of confrontation with constituents over there. And they've brought it to my attention about the noise, the mining, the blasting, the crushing of rocks, etc. over there. I do believe that our bylaw enforcement officer has been taking care of this. And since he's got involved, I've been able to get uninvolved, which is a great testament to how good our bylaw department is doing. Haskets Drive, on the agenda, many phone calls, emails, and texts about the drainage problems up there, trying to educate me on it so that I can act on their behalf. Present Island, emails and texts of how disappointed they are about the solid waste situation and the non-pickup of surplus garbage on the island with the barge. Oh, lots of calls about the Gypsy Moth Spring. We'll get into that later. Floating cottages in Ontario becoming a big concern, not just on Little Lake Gloucester Pool, becoming a big concern across the province. And our township has certainly made their stance very prevalent. So we'll keep up with that and keep the fight to keep those things away from us. I had a very interesting meeting with a private investor who wants to invest in a product called sea bins, which I think most of us are aware of. They collect solid plastic waste from the surface of the water. And this investor would like to install a lot of these in Churches Bay and Honey Harbor to collect cigarette butts, filters, plastic bags, food containers, caps and lids from coffee cups, beverage containers, things like that, anything that floats in the water. So I'm going to continue, probably get Council Hazelton involved in this since it's in his area, and see where that leads to. And that's basically it for my month. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I guess I had a somewhat similar past month. I was very busy up until about January 22nd, 23rd. And then all of a sudden, for some reason, things went fairly quiet for a good week over the Christmas break, which I must admit I appreciated. And but you could tell as of January, I'd say as of January 4th, I started getting the phone calls again. And even though there were some emails over Christmas, they became certainly more intense last week. Interesting, Councillor Bocek, you brought up the floating cottages. On January 6th, last week, Thursday, had a meeting in the afternoon, and that included our MPP Norm Miller, our MP Scott Aitchison, and a number of people from the MNRF, or whatever all the initials are now, because I think they have at least half a dozen initials in there. And it was very clear from that meeting that the MNN, the province, the ministry, is very actively working on what they can do in regard to the floating cottages. It was quite clear, mind you, that their jurisdiction had certain limitations. You know, they were talking about anchorage limitations and things like that. But what also came up in that discussion was, you know, these floating cottages, and I'm just using that term because there's numerous terms, but you know, are they a vessel? Do they have to meet building code in their construction? You know, there's a whole list of things which clearly is going to have to involve other ministries, but at least some people are talking about, and I can tell you that both our MPP and our MP are fully aware and on board with, you know, this is an issue. You know, I brought up, for instance, in the discussion, gray water and how, you know, regardless of your craft, whether it's a fully licensed boat or it's a not yet licensed floating cottage or what have you, I don't believe that anyone should be allowed to put gray water in the lake, because, you know, with a cottage, we're not even allowed to have, in most cases, a French drain, you know, 50 meters away, whereas these folks can just open up a valve and go straight in the lake. Well, there's an inconsistency there that needs to be addressed. And I will tell you that the people I spoke with on Thursday were appreciative of that. Let me call it discrepancy in the rules. But like any good people working for a government agency, they like to be very careful, because they know no matter what they end up doing, there's a very real possibility of legal challenge. So they're doing a lot of homework on it. We're not there yet, but the work continues. And with that, I'm going to turn the screen over to our CAO if she has any communications for us, this being her perhaps last round of doing this.
It's not perhaps, it is. It's
I'm always the optimist.
I prefer perhaps.
Well, thank you, Your Worship and Council. As the Mayor has stated, this is my last communications from CAO for Georgian Bay. So I'll take a quick moment and thank all of the councillors and staff and residents I've had the pleasure of working with over the last 13 plus years. It's been an experience, to say the least, and I look forward to taking all of the things I've learned and implementing them in the new municipality I'll be working at, which is Ramera, as of January 24th. So thank you all for your support over the years. It's been really appreciated. And I just wanted to add two more things based on what I've heard. And Councillor Bocek mentioned the CCANs. So tomorrow, during the adoption of the planning agenda, we're going to add a closed session item because we finally received a legal opinion about them. So we're going to be discussing that legal opinion in closed session. And I also just wanted to reiterate what the Mayor said about the meeting that I also attended on January 6th. And I can tell you, without getting into too much detail, as they asked us not to, that halfway through the meeting, I had no faith whatsoever. But by the end of it, I felt very comfortable that something was going to be done sooner than later with this matter.
Can I just add that there's a CEO position available at the library level if you're interested?
I've been the acting CEO for the libraries since there was a and I will say no thank you.
Oh. All right, and don't go anywhere, because the next item on our agenda is the items tracker. Oh, yes. And I believe Councillor Jarvis had already brought that up as to wanting to discuss it. So we'll let him initiate any conversation that may take place in regards to the action items tracker. Councillor Jarvis.
Yeah, I'm going to start off with something very specific, and then I'm going to move into something a little more general. And I don't expect really any specific answers, but maybe I'll get them. First off, I really appreciate that the tracker now is, it's going back to the beginning of our term. That's a lot, but there's a lot of stuff on that tracker. I'm sure everybody has noted. I'm going to bring up the item. I think it's at the very top of the list, and this is the one that kind of annoys me because it's sort of an example of other things that have gone on. It was a subscription weather forecasting service that we talked about back in Ooh, how long ago we talked about that? A while back, last January. And I know that we had recommended that that we look at getting tying in with the subscription service with the district, and that they come back saying no. But I see that the item is now closed, meaning that nothing more is being done about it. And I would think that, given the circumstances, it'd be something we'd be pursuing further as opposed to just shutting down. And again, it's just my thinking on this. And there are a number of other items that sort of follow the same route. They show closed. In some cases, they show closed with no notes, so we don't know why they're closed. And I think it'd be really important that we try and have sort of that background in there. Having said just those two items, this is a big list, and I know it's really difficult for everybody on staff to do this on top of everything else they're doing. It's a lot of catch up. So I'm not trying to apply pressure. I'm just trying to seek, I guess, clarity in how we work with this tracker. So I make my comments. I'm not necessarily seeking a response, but if you can, that'd be great.
Go ahead. Followed by Mr. Sokash.
So if I may, we go based on what the resolution states. So that resolution, for instance, stated that we asked the district to obtain the subscription. We asked them, that is what you directed us to do. So it's closed. We did what you told us to do. If you want us to keep moving on with something, like keep harassing them or keep looking for an update, you'd have to add that to the resolution, because we can't just make work for our own selves, because you give us more than enough to do on the monthly basis.
We do?
If you can believe it, based on this 24-page document.
Yeah. Okay. No, I understand. Okay. Thank you. So you're just sticking to the rule of the resolution, which makes sense. Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Mr. Sokash, did you want to add a comment on this particular item?
Sure. Thank you, through the mayor. We did communicate with the district. They weren't willing at the time to take on our subscription, so we continued with our previous practice of printing off weather reports and signing them. Since then, they have entered into a contract with a different weather forecasting service. They're covering all the costs. So far, it's been a fantastic service. We love it. It seems to be quite accurate, and that's where we sit.
Oh, marvelous. I'm happy to have that update. Thank you.
Councillor Wiancko, please.
Yeah, this tracking chart, it's going like 25 pages or something like that. It's just too much for any individual to review on a regular basis. Is there any way we can divide it into a list of the actions that have been completed and the ones that are yet to be completed? I would be more interested in the actions that we're still working on than the ones that we've already completed. So is there a way of splitting the list into two different lists?
Yeah, I'm definitely sure that staff can sort of filter it between the closed, pending, or open, and maybe send you 3 different ones so you can choose which one to take a look at.
Clerk Way.
I was just going to say that perhaps if I know we have to attach the PDF to the agenda, but if we circulate the raw Excel file, then council can circulate it, filter it however they wish, because then they could search by topic, they could filter it by staff member, they could filter it by closed or pending. That might be an easier solution.
I can't filter 25 pages, sorry. I think I'm only interested in the ones that aren't completed, really.
I know, but you can sort that yourself using Excel. So maybe
no, I'm not 25 pages. No, I'm sorry, I can't do 25 pages.
I was just going to suggest that when staff do send the Excel spreadsheet out, they send a quick how-to.
Councillor Hazelton, please.
So sadly, I'm a little bit of an Excel junkie, and I love the Excel version of it. I produced a few statistics that I just thought I'd share with council. So I went into each year, 2021, 2020, 2019. And what I did was I took the different status codes that are there, closed, open, pending, blank, and tried to figure out how were we doing in this Excel or in this action tracking. And I'm just going to report statistics. I won't comment on them. but I will say that for 2021, 44% of the items are not yet closed. In 2020, 72% of the items are not yet closed. And in 2019, 91% of the items are not yet closed. Now that could be the report isn't fully updated, but I just thought it would be useful for us to all understand what the statistics show. I think that this is absolutely excellent from a tracking perspective. We desperately need to have this kind of visibility. And to Councillor Jarvis's comment about the weather forecasting, you know, I think as councillors, what we should be doing is going in and reading the items, whether they're closed or open. And for example, in Councillor Jarvis's case, you know, he would have read that the weather forecasting topic was closed, but in fact, he might be thinking, well, I don't want staff to stop looking at it. Maybe we need to bring that back to council. So I'm not looking for staff to make those decisions necessarily, but I think as councillors, one of our jobs is to find a way to make this this action item tracking list useful and manageable. I do understand Councillor Wiancko's you know, comments. Not everybody is an Excel junkie and they won't understand how to make this thing work. There's an enormous amount of information here that should help us as a township get to a better place. And I absolutely applaud the process that has been started. And I think there's a lot of steps that we still need to go on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on this particular item? All right. Thank you very much. We now go into staff reports. I see that it's almost 11 o'clock. I would think that people probably want a little bit of a break because we've been doing this for 2 hours. So I'm going to suggest that we reconvene at 11:10. Councillor Douglas, you wanted to add something? No, okay. So let's take a break and reconvene at 11:10, please. right. Clerk Way, was the live streaming continuing while we were on so that we don't have to do anything to re-trigger it or the recording? Okay, then I'm going to say let's get into action at 11:10. And we now have a series of 4 staff reports. The first one being the Pratt's Road Culvert Wetland Assessment. And Director Sokash, I believe this is your report, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Council may recall that staff were directed to retain the services of Dr. Patricia Chow-Fraser to undertake an assessment of the wetland in the vicinity of the Pratt's Road culvert. And the reason for this was to obtain an opinion on the status or condition of the water in the wetland and whether the culvert that goes under Pratt's Road is having any impact on the water quality. If putting in a larger culvert or a bridge with a larger opening would enhance the quality of the water in that wetland. So Dr. Chow-Fraser completed the assessment over the summer. We received a report in December, and basically she concluded that the water quality in wetland has very good fish habitat. There is not an issue with the water quality, and that the culvert that provides some flow into the wetland is having minimal influence on the condition of the wetland and the water, and is not essential to maintain the ecosystem health. And based on that, staff are recommending that further work not continue on this project. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And I will say I greatly appreciate this report. I thought it was a very, very thorough report, and with as much historical reference as I think was possible. But I'm going to turn it over to Council if there's any comments, questions, or suggestions. And I'll start with Councillor Bochuk, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Director Sokach, for pursuing and getting the study done by Dr. Patricia Fraser. I did read the report in its entirety, and I can't believe the in-depth report that was given to us. Not only the biological part of it, the technical part of it, but the historical part of it. Very impressive work. Not the outcome that I was expecting at all, but science is science, and the science will prevail in this case. One thing I did notice in the report, Brad, was that the degradation of the wetlands has not been caused by the reducing of the culvert size. The only thing that I'm going to suggest before we move on with this is that that culvert continually blocks up, as the mayor and Mr. Wiancko both know, blocks up with sediment and blocks up with sticks and branches, and impedes what flow there is at certain times of year, which adds to the flushing of that bay. And well, I think I agree with the science that by putting a bridge in or a larger culvert is not going to significantly change the chemistry of the bay. I would like to see a maintenance program put in to keep that culvert clear. And that's about the gist of it. Many times I've gone up there, that culvert is completely clogged. There's a current that flows through there. We know that because the branches and the sediment from that bay collect in that culvert. If there was no water movement, that wouldn't happen. So my suggestion is, and my want is, that our operations department on a regular basis, whether it's being up there for doing road maintenance or whatever, continuously look at that culvert. And if it's clogged up, unclog it. Use our staff. If you have to bring in a sucker truck, bring in a sucker truck. But I think it's imperative, if we're not going to do anything in the way of increasing the size of the culvert or making it a bridge, at least keep what's there cleaned. And that's my only request at this time. And I thank you.
Director Sokash.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Councillor Bochuk. The only thing I would add is I did specifically ask that question of Dr. Chow-Fraser, whether performing maintenance on the culvert, keeping it open for the flow when there is winds or the water levels change would help the wetland. And in her opinion, it would have minimal, if any, impact. But as we've said before, council directs us to undertake the work. We're happy to do it, and we'll do it to the best of our abilities.
Yeah, thanks, Brad, and I appreciate your comment. I agree with Dr. Pat Chow-Fraser that the wetlands, by keeping that culvert clean, would not change. But there's more than just the wetlands here. There's our residents here too, and there is a balance between keeping nature and helping our residents. And the concern of everyone on this body of water is that that flow does help, maybe not with the health of the wetlands, but it certainly helps them out. It keeps the weeds down a little bit, keeps, so that they can use the bay for something other than harvesting rice weeds, etc. So I would like to see the maintenance program continue on that culvert at least twice a year, spring and fall. And if it need be that I put a resolution forward to give, that council gives staff direction to do this, I'm certainly willing to put that resolution forward. But I think it's imperative that we believe the science, we believe the study, and know that our wetlands are being safe and secure. But at the same time, let's try and help out our constituents by keeping this culvert clean and helping get rid of some of the surface stuff that floats around in there.
All right, thank you. I have Councillors Cooper, followed by Wiancko, followed by Douglas, please.
Brad, I just thank you, Mayor Kutzer, and Brad, I just wanted to thank you for pursuing this, and what an incredibly comprehensive report. Unreal. And I just wanted to comment that aren't we fortunate that we have Dr. Pat Chow-Fraser able to do this for us, but also be so involved in the water testing on Georgian Bay. It's pretty remarkable. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wiancko, please.
Yeah, I was impressed with the report itself, and I was somewhat surprised at the outcome of the report. I think I agree with Councillor Btk that we need to have some kind of a maintenance program developed that would keep some kind of flow going through there. It just makes common sense that you have a little fresh water going in there every so often. It's got to be a positive thing. I think if you block off it too much, I think there's going to be some stagnation, especially at certain times of the year. There may be some high bacteria counts, but we don't want to get into the situation where we have stagnation. I know she was in there this past summer. Well, that's, again, a one-off study, and you really don't have a long-term impacts of that flow. So I think to have some kind of a minimalistic of flow into that area to avoid stagnation, I would appreciate that.
Thank you. Councillor Douglas.
Thank you. I just actually, Councillor Wiancko covered most of what I had to say anyways. I agree that I think that we should look into what the cost of doing a spring and fall maintenance would be. I'd also like to say we are very lucky to have Dr. Pat Chow-Fraser. This was a report that I found to be really informative, and I think we're quite lucky to have her do some of the things she's doing for us right now. But I would like to know if we could just ask staff to just come back and let us know what the cost of doing a maintenance on a fall and spring would be for that culvert.
All right, thank you. Councillor Hazelton, please.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Brad a question, then probably make a comment here. But Brad, if my memory serves me correctly, I think you had been approved for an amount of $6,000 to do this assessment?
Through the mayor, that is correct.
So I think what my comments on this are going to be is we are, as a township, continually looking for a model terms of reference for a wetland study or an environmental impact assessment. And I think what we have seen here is the depth and scope of what a good wetland assessment is. Everybody is showing or making comments about how impressed they are with it. And I think when I hear about what private individuals have had to spend, typically in the way of $5,000 or $6,000 for this type of assessment, but what they get is a joke compared to what we have got here. I think what we want to perhaps try to do is ask staff to take the caliber of this report and find some way of transferring it into a model or terms of reference, so that anybody else being asked to provide this kind of wetland assessment is required to provide this level and depth of information, so that we have accurate access or complete access to the science behind all of the matters related to this. I'm absolutely thrilled with what we've got, and I applaud the work that's been done. But I think we have an opportunity to learn from this and formulate this into a template for our township going forward. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councillor Jarvis, do you want to say anything before we go back to Councillor Bocek? Councillor Bocek, you wanted a second round?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a comment. It's always nice when you have an academic creating a report. You're certainly going to get what we got here. And I don't think we can expect that from a lot of businesses that are providing reports on fish habitat or water quality. But I do commend Dr. Pat Chow-Fraser and her department at MAC for doing such a thorough job.
Thank you. I have a question of staff, if I may, and that is, given that a number of people on council have made a suggestion that if we have a culvert, we might as well maintain it, or if it's not my words, why bother with a culvert if you're just going to let it block up? Do you need a resolution from council to maintain our culverts, or in this one in particular, or is that something that a simple, you understand our wishes and our direction? And I don't know if culvert maintenance is a regular item on your operations agenda for every year. So that's my question, Mr. Sokash.
Through the mayor's, culvert maintenance is a regular maintenance item, but this one is a little bit different than what we typically do. So I believe one of the councillors has suggested we come back with a cost estimate for maintaining the culvert. And I'm not sure if we need a resolution for that, or if we can just put it on the report tracking and bring it back next meeting. But I'd respectfully suggest that would be the best approach. I'd be most comfortable with that approach.
I think our CEO has an opinion.
I sure do. And you're going to miss this, I'm sure. But I would like a resolution so that it doesn't get sort of lost in the shuffle. And a staff direction to do something like that, I don't think is sufficient.
All right, thank you. So the first thing I think we should do, council, is consider the resolution in front of us, but perhaps actually change the wording on it slightly. And I'll tell you why I mean, because the wording currently says, if I can get here to the bottom, it says, be advised, the township will not be taking further steps to maintain or enhance the flow of water through the Kratz Road culvert. And I think that's the sentence that part we may have a little challenge with, given what I've heard from some councillors so far. So, the first part, that we received the report, that's obvious. Obvious. It is obvious to me. It may not be to council until I call for the vote, but I think receiving the report we can do. For the second sentence, currently receives in full, that based on the results of the assessment by Dr. Chow-Fraser, residents in the vicinity of the Pratt's Road culvert be provided a copy of the assessment report and be advised that the township will not be taking any further steps to maintain or enhance the flow of the water through the Pratt Road culvert. I think we want to revise that second part. And I'm going to suggest that we might just want to say, will we not be taking any further steps to enhance the flow, or maybe just get rid of that part of it. I don't know. I'm open to suggestions, including from our staff, but we'll start with Councillor Cooper.
Well, I would thank you, Mayor Kutzer. I think we have the answer from Chow-Fraser. I guess the other thing that would be helpful for me to make a decision is what's it going to cost for our staff to clean this out from time to time? And I think a report back from Brad and his department, do we have the equipment to do that too? All those kinds of things I think would be relevant to this, given that we have a report that says you can probably leave it the way it is. And I'm not necessarily promoting that. I'm simply saying we need more information. Thank you.
Well, then, based on that input, I'm going to make a suggestion. And one is that we modify the current resolution just to drop off the second half of the sentence. So the first resolution will be it resolved that report entitled Ecosystem-Based Assessment of the Quality of the Pratts Road Wetland by Professor Patricia Chow-Fraser, dated December 9th, 2021, be received. And that based on the results of the assessment of a Dr. Chow-Fraser, residents in the vicinity of Pratts Road culvert be provided with a copy of the assessment report. Full stop. And that would be the first resolution. And then a second resolution with regards to asking staff to report on maintenance costs. Okay, I'm seeing heads nod, and that's close enough to a positive for me that I'm going to have moved by Councillor Bocek and seconded by Councillor Hazelton the resolution that I just read, which ends with the residents being provided a copy of the assessment report. Councillor Bocek.
Question of clarification, perhaps CAO Gombe could comment on it. When you're saying furnish the residents of the Pratt Road area with a copy of the report, are you talking about simply posting it on our website so they have to go search and find it, or will we be mailing them a copy of the report?
I'm going to go on a limb and say it's on our agenda, but I don't think it is. We will likely be emailing it to those we have the contact information for. And if we do not have their contact information, I know we have a couple that Brad can email them to, and he can ask that they pass it along, or Councillor Bocek, if you have their information, if you could pass it along to me, I can make sure that Brad gets it.
Thank you.
All right. All those in favor of the amended resolution, please indicate by raising your hand. All right, and that is carried. Thank you. And while we were doing that, Clerk Way has made a suggestion for a second resolution, and I'm going to just, for convenience, move by Councillor Bocek, seconded by Councillor Wiancko. Be it resolved that Council directs staff to investigate and report back on the cost for annual maintenance of the culverts. Of the culvert, actually, it's one culvert. Does that meet the purposes of council? I'm seeing heads nod. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much. That was, I had that moved by Councillor Bocek, seconded by Councillor Wiancko, Ms. Way, for our purposes. And I think with that, we can move on to our second item. I believe that's Mr. Sokash once again in regards to the Honey Harbor Park Rehabilitation Operations Report 2022-2. Mr. Sokash.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is with respect to the rehabilitation of the outdoor rink that we currently have in Honey Harbor that's in very poor condition. So in a previous report, which unfortunately the link dropped off of my report, Ms. Schneier had reported that we received approval for funding for this project, or for part of the project, for 75% of the project from FedNor, I believe. The remainder would be funded by the township. As such, we issued a request for proposal to install a pavilion and concrete pads similar to what we have in Baxter Ward. It's the same size, similar design. We received 2 responses. We've evaluated them and recommend award to ARNAS. 1 or 2 things I'd like to point out. First of all, at least one councillor has suggested we look at putting pipes underneath for a future ice plant. So I discussed that with a couple of an engineering firm as well as a contractor, and they suggested that there would be a fairly significant cost to it. But more importantly, if we were to put in an ice plant in, say, 10 years, there's a very good chance that those pipes would not have been maintained, and we would have cracks underneath them and have to replace them. So they suggested that a retrofit would probably be the best way to do it. If we're looking at doing that, putting in a header at one end of the pavilion and pushing pipes through. Anyways, it was very technical, so we did not include that in the RFP. The second thing that I'd like to add is the RFP was issued and closed before we had an opportunity to discuss it with the First Nations, with the Mete. I'm sorry if I'm screwing up that pronunciation. They did have some suggestions which are interesting. A little bit of it is structural, which may add some cost, and if it does, we will come back to council after discussing it with the contractor. The contractors have left an allowance for recognition of the Mete, whether it's with a logo on the, actually I think it is a logo on the concrete, as well as some signage, possibly a flag and a garden as well. So that is included in the low bid by Arnes. Arnes has done some other work in our township. They're quite satisfactory. They've also done projects similar to this elsewhere. And my understanding is they were successful as well. And therefore we're recommending that this be awarded to Arnes as per the resolution.
All right. Thank you very much for your report. Councillor Cooper, we'll start the questions off with you, please.
Just clarification. This isn't in our 2022 budget, is it, Brad?
Mr. Soka.
I think there's no Julie here. I don't believe it is. I believe that it came to council in December. Ms. Schneider just popped on. She may have a different answer.
Ms. Schneider.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to comment that we did have a resolution that would allow for some capital expenditures to offset the cost of the grant if we were successful. So that resolution was passed in 2021, and I believe it was included in the 2022 capital budget.
Just further clarification. It's either in the budget or it isn't, and whether we pass the resolution may not be the facts. So I would just like to raise the issue, and I'm not suggesting I'm against this by any means, but we're talking about $125,000. I do believe when we passed our budget, we already went over by about $670,000. So we're getting close to $800,000 over budget, which is concerning. And so that would be very good to know if in fact we've built this into our budget in advance. I wonder if CAO Gumby can answer that question.
I can answer, it's not a yes or no, but I can answer that maybe we can move on to another item. There's an IT matter that Julie had to leave to deal with, and so I'm just waiting for her to verify. And as Councillor Cooper said, it would be probably not wise to approve this without knowing for sure.
Yeah, my recollection, consistent with Ms. Schneider, is that we did put an allowance in for this in our budget, but it would be very good to have it confirmed. Any questions other than the budget side? Councillor Bocek, please, followed by Councillor Hazelton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Brad, I agree with your thoughts. I'm a little bit of an expert on ice, and I agree with your thoughts. It's not financially feasible or the responsible thing to do to put an ice plant in or plummet for ice. Most of us skate on the lake or the pond. I don't think that's the concern of the residents, the permanent residents of Honey Harbor. That is their year-round community center, not just for skating in the winter, which hasn't happened for the past couple of winters. But when you have your jazz festival and you have, you know, the Honeybee Festival or whatever, it's an event center that we can use. Unfortunately, it wasn't covered before, so we had picnic tables and umbrellas. But I've attended all the events that happened there, and they're quite enjoyable. And it's a big part of bringing a community together. One of the main things that our Ontario government has said that in future planning, outdoor activities are a positive thing. we don't know where we're going with issues in Canada, health issues and that, but they say outdoors is the best place to be. And I think this is a great project for the people of Honey Harbor, and I will fully support this. And my one concern is that there was an allocation in the budget for it. That's key. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments at this point? Councilor Hazelton, I already recognized that you were coming. If I look down, I'd see the H.
Okay, thank you. So when I read the recommendation, it certainly occurs to me that we're funding this out of the Park Reserve Fund and the Operation Capital Reserve Fund. So that doesn't look like it's an operational budget or a new capital budget. So I'm reassured from that. But one of the things I wanted to point out here, first of all, I am very, very supportive of this. We as a township do not have a lot of park or recreational investments as part of the township, and this is one of the few. And so I think we absolutely want to be supportive of this. I also wanted to highlight our and sadly Julie's not here to hear this, but this is the first time that I've seen a future cost recognized up front. And we've had other projects recently where we've received government money, and we have pretended that we just get the money and then the future is no cost. But in fairness, we are being told here very clearly that the annual accrual is going to be $49,000 a year and is going to have a tax capital levy impact going forward. Now, it doesn't scare me that we're doing this. I want to, first of all, draw that out and make it visible for us all. We all, I think, need to approve it this way, but I'm absolutely delighted that our finance department have seen fit to help us understand what this annual future accrual is going to be, so that we have a full picture of this project and not run around thinking that, oh, we get government money and the future is free. So Julie, now that you're here, thank you very, very much for giving us the full picture.
Through your worship, I missed a part of the conversation. There was an IT thing happening and I stepped away. If there is a question, if that question could be repeated, I would greatly appreciate that.
The question very simply is, was this in our budget that we passed for 2022?
Through your worship, there is a portion of this which is a reconstruction of the park that was part of our capital budget for 2022. And then the grant portion and the new project is also part of our budget as a new item. However, these grantable projects and new projects do come back for council approval.
In other words, we did make allowances for this in our. This is not throwing us more offside than we already were with our the budget we approved.
Through your worship. However, though, since this will be a new 2022 asset, it will have a annual capital cost impact subsequent to 2022.
Basically saving for replacement costs down the road.
Correct.
Yeah, and Council, I hope you caught it, but Councillor Hazelton was very complimentary of that. And I believe he was probably speaking for many other councillors when he shared that perspective. And I'm even seeing a couple thumbs up. So I can't be telling complete lies here. Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Botchek, I was going to ask you, you're ready for me calling the resolution, but I'm going to say Councillor Botchek isn't quite.
No, in reading the report, legacy costs is something that's very important with all the projects we do within this township. A big portion of those legacy costs were already in place. I mean, we have to cut the lawns, we have to replace the picnic tables, we have to maintain the boards. We've been doing this all along, and those costs are there already and will continue after this project is done. And they may increase somewhat after this project is done. But I can't state enough how much this is welcomed by the people in Honey Harbor. and that legacy costs being included in any projects moving forward should be included if they can be included. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any hands, so I'm going to read the resolution. I have moved by Councillor Wiancko, seconded by Councillor Douglas. Be it resolved that the contract for a new pavilion and concrete at the Honey Harbor Park be awarded to Aaron's, I'm not sure how they pronounce it, Aaron's Construction Limited, my apologies on that, in the amount of $549,000 plus HST. And that the township portion be funded from the Parks Reserve Fund and the Operations Capital Reserve, and that the annual cost of this project for future replacement or rehabilitation is $49,000 from $6,500, and that council agrees to a tax increase in the capital levy of 2023 of 2.39% to start funding this annual capital cost. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much. And now we have two reports coming from our clerk's department, and the first of which is a draft code of conduct. And Ms. Wade, do you want to speak to this matter?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't have a lot of comments to make. I mean, the draft document is there. There was only a couple of minor changes after the last draft, which was to ensure that the reporting time for the incident is 6 weeks from the date of incident or the knowledge of the incident, and that there's a duty to acknowledge for members, so they're fully aware that this document exists, and so there'll be a sign-off sheet, and there's a little clause about that now added to the end of the code. But that's basically the major updates. The Integrity Commissioner has reviewed our draft. She has no major comments, just a couple little questions, I guess, that she had for me, but she has no objections to any of the changes or amendments that we've made from how it would impact her or any future Integrity Commissioners. So I'm really just hoping we can have this approved and we can move forward from this project.
Well, before I turn it over to council, I want to thank you for all the work. This has been a project for a fair length of time, and I'm hoping we're very close to the finish line. But I must open it up to council to see if there are any additional comments or questions. Council, Councillor Bocek.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'll address my question to Karen. The code of conduct at the time of inauguration was part of the swearing in process, I believe, and certainly when a new council is appointed, there's the review of the code of conduct and there's a signature offered at that point in time. Are we talking about an interim code of conduct change, or are we talking about this would take place at the inauguration of the new council?
This would take place upon it being passed today, or whenever date it would be passed, but it would be current as of the date it becomes passed.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I'm going to call for the vote. All those in favor? Okay, I'm sensing that we have 6 out of 7 voting in favor. But that is carried. Thank you very much. And your next report is committee terms of reference policy.
So in December, the procedural bylaw was updated. And just for consistency's sake, we have updated the committee terms of reference policy, just so any changes in the procedure bylaw are now reflected within the committee terms of reference. Notably, some of the definitions were updated, reference to electronic meetings, some of the memberships were updated, and the meeting schedule process was updated as well. I don't think there's nothing new added to this document other than what we've kind of already approved through the procedural bylaw and what has been in practice already. We're just looking to formalize our changes.
All right, thank you very much. Council, any questions? Councillor Hazelton, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a a few comments here, if you'll permit me to walk through this. The first comment is under item C, definitions. The definition of an advisory committee has been removed, and yet we have a Honey Harbor advisory committee, and I'm wondering, that appears to me to be inconsistent, where we have an advisory committee but we don't have a definition of an advisory committee. So can you help me understand that?
Ms. Way, you're muted, Ms. Way.
I don't believe that definition was removed from this document. Perhaps it was referenced in the procedural bylaw, because anything that was in there would have been, so I'm just trying to pull it up in front of me. Under definitions, there was always ad hoc, appointment, closed meeting, open meeting, and quorum. But advisory committee was not one of the definitions underneath the committee terms of reference.
Okay, so in the ad hoc committee, it has the word advisory, and the advisory means a committee forum, blah, 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 all crossed out. And I'm wondering, we have an advisory committee, but we have no definition of advisory. There seems to be a gap there, and it seems to be useful to close that gap.
Yeah. So ad hoc, we just had it consistent because the definition for ad hoc in the terms of reference policy was different than that at the procedural bylaw, which doesn't help us when we're enforcing some of our own rules. One thing we can do is add in the definition of committee, which is within the procedural bylaw, if that provides some clarification. And it just references committee means all committee compositions as are defined in the current municipal terms of reference policies. So the Honey Harbor CAG is outlined what their intent and purpose is within this document. So we don't need to say they're an advisory committee to say what the advisory committee is if we already say what it is that they're responsible for and do. And further down in the document, there's a whole section on advisory committees and what that means. So that's why it's not necessarily its own separate definition within it.
I hear what you're saying. I guess if we have a section on advisory committees and we don't have a definition of advisory, then maybe there's a gap there.
CEO Gumby.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I'm just going to suggest that there was some sort of editorial error, because it looks like advisory was supposed to be its own definition, but maybe a backspace was hit to include it in the definition above, because it says ad hoc means, and then in the middle of it, it says advisory means. So I think that was supposed to be its own definition, to clarify.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mayor, can I go on with other?
Yes.
Okay. So scrolling down to the Honey Harbor CAG. That's the next topic. And we have crossed out the committee of the whole. And I'm wondering, generally, we have committees who can advise council or committee of the whole. And I'm wondering what the meaning is or the impact is of erasing the committee of the whole as one of the advice provided to groups. Does Honey Harbor CAG always then provide advice to council, or it would seem to me that there are a lot of topics that need more fulsome discussion, and having Honey Harbor CAG provide advice and recommendations to the committee of the whole would still be a valid path of recommendation.
The reason that was changed was because it's delaying the process, and that's one of the reasons why we shifted all of the minutes and the resolutions to the council agendas, so that's just been following our practice. So we've been doing this in practice. We haven't been sending the CAG resolutions to CAL, we've been sending them to council. So we've updated the committee terms of reference to reference that fact. If council still wants the option to send something to COW, that's perfectly within their right to do so, or we can leave it so it says council or COW, but I would not recommend removing council, as that is how we have been practicing this for about as long as I've been here.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting we remove council. All I'm suggesting is that there may be items that the Honey Harbor CAG is wanting to recommend that would require fulsome discussion, and that forum is really COW and not council. And by taking it out of here, we prevent a forum of fulsome discussion. Anyway, a recommendation there. I won't belabor that one. I'll move on here. We under the Planning Advisory Committee, it says the role of the Planning Advisory Committee is to provide support to the Planning Department, and yet as being a member of the Planning Advisory Committee, it seems that almost everything that that committee provides in the way of resolutions come directly to COW or council. And so I think that there is some inconsistency here in, I can guarantee you there's a belief that the role of the members of the Planning Advisory Committee is to in fact provide recommendations to council, either directly to council or through COW. I'm not trying to diminish helping or supporting the planning department, but I'm not sure that articulating here that the role is to provide support to the planning department without including the past practices of the resolutions come to council or COW. I think that's a critical element that we need to find a way to incorporate.
CO Gunby, you want to comment on that?
I do, thank you, Your Worship. Just to clarify to all of council, nothing in that was changed at all except for the insertion of the word advisory. And that is their role, to advise planning staff, because when they help with recommendations or bylaw suggestions, that helps staff create them to bring them to council. So nothing has changed in the definition of what they do. We've just inserted the word advisory to sort of outline to them that they are an advisory committee, not the final decision-making authority.
I understand that, and I don't think anybody in the Planning Advisory Committee would argue that they are a recommending entity. They're not a decision-making entity, but we routinely receive recommendations from the Planning Advisory Committee, sorry, the Planning Advisory Committee at COW or council. So that's a practice that we have. I don't think we want to change that practice. And I think that the wording in the definition of the role here, it leaves out that important characteristic that we have been and probably want to continue to have the Planning Committee provide resolutions that will come to COW or council for consideration.
Yeah,
I have more comments, Your Mayor.
Okay, well let's resolve this one way or another before we go on to others.
Staff can easily insert the same sentence that's under the CAG, saying that they will provide recommendations to Committee of the Whole or Council. So they're both the same.
No, I think that's practical given that the mandate has been directed by Committee of the Whole or Council. I think the Committee of the Whole or Council would like to hear from them. So I think your suggestion, CO Gunby, is an excellent one. Again, thumbs up from our Director of Planning as well. So Councillor Hazelton next.
One of the points of repeated conversation within the Planning Committee is the ability to provide comment to council or Committee of the Whole. And under the meeting structure, it says the meetings shall be called by the chair in response to requests from either council or committee of the whole. But perhaps there are agenda items that are needed to cover based on previous requests from committee of the whole or council. In other words, and maybe I'm just being a little too anal on this, but the structure of the meeting isn't just to handle new requests from council or committee of the whole, but in fact, the committee has a fairly long list of things that we've been asked to deal with. And I think from a meeting structure perspective, the requests in aggregate that we've been asked to deal with need to be part of the consideration. And I'm not sure that maybe I'm just being too anal on this, but maybe that wording under the definition of meetings there doesn't really capture all of that. I'll leave that one aside just for a moment here and come down to the reporting structure and highlight the fact that under reporting structure, we already have a sentence in here that says planning committee will make the recommendations to the committee of the whole or directly to council if time sensitive. And I just wanted to highlight that I fully agree with that statement, but I also wanted to highlight the fact that that is inconsistent with what we've already talked about back in the role. And I think all I'm trying to do here is, as we are crafting this document, let's try to make sure that it's consistent within itself and reflective of the things that we've already talked about. I think we have concurrence there. And can I move on, Mayor?
Sure.
I was reading out a property standards committee. I wasn't aware of it. I don't know who's on the committee. I'm not looking to be on the committee. But I was just wondering who is currently on the committee.
CEO Gunby.
Thank you. We have 3 members of the public on the committee. If you paid me $1 million, I might be able to remember 2 of them because it's been that long since we've met. We've only had to meet once just because there was an appeal on a property standards order filed on a property. And we only had to form the committee because it was the first time we received an appeal. And that was maybe 6 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So
we're legally mandated to have that committee.
Yeah, so thank you for that. I guess when I'm reading the composition here, it says composed of 3 citizen members and 1 member of council. So I'm just wondering who is the councillor that is on that committee? Oh,
no one from this term.
Mr. Bocek, is that you? Anyways, those are my my comments and questions. Thanks very much.
On the initial meeting, there was a couple of councillors involved. And it's been a long time. It was, God, right at the beginning of my first term of council.
Okay, Councillor Wiancko, you had some comments you wanted to add.
No, I think at one of the last meetings, I was the chair of it. I think in the last term, and I think you probably you're a chair this term, I think, but I was the chair of the last term. We had 1 meeting.
Yeah. Don't know if any other I have, if I may, clerk away a concern, and that is under the Honey Harbor Community Advisory Group. You have a whole section that's brand new on Métis membership, and I know that this has been suggested that we add some Métis members to the Honey Harbor Community Advisory Group in regards to the park being refurbished. My concern, though, that this is very specific,
Yes.
Just for that particular park. And I'd hate, what I don't like about this is that this sort of almost, by putting it in our report, on your terms of reference report, you're almost saying that this is the way it's going to be for the future. And to me, this is almost handcuffing us if, for instance, we asked the committee of the advisory committee to look at some other matter down the road where we may want a slightly different mixture in the advisory group, and I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about the fact that we've made reference to Métis citizens, but no reference to Indigenous citizens. And we know we certainly have Indigenous residents in the Honey Harbor area. So I'm wondering whether it behooves us, if it's wise of us, to have this very specific thing in our terms of reference. And I see Ms. Schneier is going to add an opinion to this. Ms. Schneier.
Thank you, Your Worship. We did reach out to a couple of things. We did reach out to the other Indigenous communities that are direct neighbors to us, and they are fine with the Métis Council being named exclusively with respect to the Honey Harbor Community Advisory Group, because there is a strong Métis community in Honey Harbor. And I would like to just draw back, Your Worship, to the comments from the advisory group that they wanted to have a significant influence of the Métis people on the advisory group with respect to the Honey Harbor waterfront and naming, as well as the Honey Harbor Park. So we met with the Georgian Bay Métis Council, and they have asked for 5 spots on that advisory group. I don't disagree that there may be other issues that come forward that may not necessarily have direct relation to the Métis Council. However, in the spirit of truth and reconciliation, I wonder if we would want to keep communication strong with the Métis Council if there is something else in Honey Harbor that is being discussed, and for which we would want to have a comment and are able to, because the Métis Council is represented.
And I have no dispute with what you've said, other than I want to add that part of this says 2 Métis citizen members who self-identify as Métis. But what about residents in the Honey Harbor area who identify as Indigenous, not Métis? Have we ruled them out? Or have we ruled out people who are of, I'm going to call it mixed blood, if that's a politically correct term, and I'm not sure it is, who don't identify as Métis, but are without doubt have, you know, Indigenous or Métis background in their, call it bloodline. You follow me?
I do. I respect what you're saying, and I think that when you provide an opportunity for anybody to identify as Métis, we are light years ahead in terms of what we have traditionally done with respect to communication and involvement of the Métis or Indigenous or anybody else in this particular community. It is very clear to the advisory group and to members of the community and the Métis Council that their history, lineage, and population and membership is very strong in Honey Harbor. So what we did is we reached out to the other 2 Indigenous communities in the immediate area, and they were in agreement that this could be specific to the Métis people because of the lineage and the heritage.
All right.
Additionally, sorry, Your Worship, when this went through, when this change was requested by the Honey Harbor KIG, it was specifically referenced to be Métis membership. And that was the request of the committee, and that was the resolution that had been approved. So this is us moving forward with that direction.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm going to let it go for now, but I think we may want to consider in the future just to make sure we don't rule out Indigenous people who are not resident of the Indigenous communities in our neighborhood, but are actually resident of our township. Anyway, that was my comment. Any other comments from council? Councilor Bocek.
I'm inclined to agree with you, Mr. Mayor. The Métis Council is certainly not located anywhere near us. It's the very north of Georgian Bay. I think we have a council member in Midland, if I'm not mistaken, who was elected to the Métis Council. But are we talking about a Indigenous or Métis person to sit on this, or are we talking about a council member of the Métis Council sitting on this? That's where I just need a little bit of clarification.
member within the Métis Council. So not the actual, my understanding is not the actual council, so not a Métis councillor, I'm saying that term correctly, but someone who is within the Métis Council or would elect or report to. Is that Jen? Thank you, Ms. Schneier.
You're welcome, Ms. Way. Your Worship, I wonder if I could, sorry, Your Worship, my hand's up.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. We met with the Métis Council to discuss the complement that is being referenced today. And they would like to have 2 members of the Georgian Bay Métis Council, of which there are some other members of the Georgian Bay Métis Council, not necessarily on the executive, that are definitely from the community of Honey Harbor. And then the other 3 people that would be on the committee would be first members of the community of Honey Harbor who choose to identify as Métis. And then if that doesn't satisfy the requirement to get people on the committee, then we would look at residents who are from the community of Honey Harbor and have strong family alliance, but may not necessarily live there right now. And also that would include students who are away at university, because I believe that that possibly could apply as well.
Great, thanks for the clarification, Jennifer. Appreciate it. And
all right,
Karen? Thank
you very much. Question to you, Ms. Way, given some of the suggestions and concerns that have been expressed by Councillor Hazelton and some suggestions that have been made as to editing, should we defer this item until next month so that you can do an update?
I think a deferral would be helpful for staff. I have some detailed notes. I don't think a resolution outlining specifics would be necessary in this case.
Council, can I just get a wave of hands or a nod? You're in agreement with a deferral? I'm seeing lots of positive there. So let's defer this item until next week. Sorry, next month, unless we want a council meeting next week, but I'm not sure. We have a great appetite. Oh, Clerk has already ruled that one out. And let's say thank you very much for the work you've done on this. And I think it's good work to update our policies and get them in line with our practices and our wishes. So I thank you for all your work on this. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Our next topic is Blackline Consulting. And I just wanted to confirm with everyone, we have a closed session meeting, and I'm trying to recall when exactly that was scheduled for. I'm just trying to coordinate our timing and our plans in regard to when we might take a lunch break. Because right now
Your Worship, we don't have a set time for closed session. We don't have anyone coming that isn't flexible at this point in time.
Okay, so I'm going to suggest we look at the Blackline Consulting report and have some discussion and then break for lunch before we move on. Councillor Hazelton, you have a suggestion?
Yes, Mayor Cloutier, thank you very much. I wanted to just make a general comment about the Blackline Consulting report. I have spent a lot of time going through it. I think that there is an enormous amount of information in there, and that there is still a fair amount of material on our agenda, and that we are going to run out of time to have the depth of discussion that we really should be entertaining on that presentation. I'm not suggesting we don't do it at all, but I think we want to recognize that there is so much information in there that in order for us to fully understand it and the implications of it, that we should be looking at perhaps another time slot to dig into some of the detail in that. And so perhaps a quick superficial review of it might be okay at this point in time, recognizing that there's it looks like there's a sister report in the closed session, but there is a ton of information. I think it's excellent information. I have to say I'm extremely impressed with what I was reading, but I also think that it really warrants a lot of discussion that I don't think we're going to have time for today. Thank you.
I think that's a fair enough comment. Councilor Cooper, you wanted to add to that?
Ditto, and I would like to see us maybe, there may be a few things in here that we can deal with, you know, sort of more immediately, but generally speaking, I think this requires quite a bit of attention, and I know there's not a lot of appetite on the clerk's part to want to have extra meetings. I understand that. On the other hand, I think this is so critical for us that we really do need to set aside some special time on this. And I don't want to see us looking at this at 6 months from now and 9 months and a year from now. I think we should get at it sooner rather than later. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Ms. Gumby, do you want to make a comment before I make my suggestion?
Just a quick one. As with the open report before you today and the sister report that Councillor Hazelton referred to, I was going to open both with, this is for your information. There are recommendations for you to consider, but I understand if you need more time before making any sort of decisions as it goes with, you know, changing the way that anything happens. So the consultants are going to be here to do the presentations either way. But if council needs more time to digest the suggestions, maybe they're available to come back next month for final ratification, if that's what it comes down to.
All right, here, I'm going to make a suggestion, if I may, following all this. Why don't we, at this point, and I think Councilor Wiancko will on the way in, why don't we at this point clear off the rest of our agenda without this item before lunch, come back after lunch and do the closed session, and then get into Blackline Consulting and just see how the conversation goes. And at least we'll get we'll give it a start today. And how far we get, I'm not sure, but let's then decide towards the end of the day how we want to go at it further. Councilor Wiancko, did you just put your hand down? No.
Oh, yeah, because it went down automatically. I agree that we should have spent some more time on this, but I wonder if we would benefit having that discussion after we hire a new CAO. It seems very critical that leadership of the corporation is being discussed, and it would be really helpful if we had a new CAO involved in those discussions. So I don't know how long we can wait, but can it be done after we have a CAO, new CAO in place to get their perspective on this? I'll let other councillors comment, but that would be my comment.
All right, Councillor Bocek.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I hear what Councillor Wiancko is saying, but I think we have a competent interim CAO during this period that is quite capable of dealing with this matter. I think really what the consensus that I get from council is, I got about 3/4 the way through this thing and my mind got clouded. It's so in depth and there's so much to do with operations here that a lot of time is going to need to be spent on this. And I agree with the mayor that let's move forward this afternoon, get it started and see where it lends. If we need to finish it in a special meeting or next month, whatever. But I think Julie's quite capable of moving forward with this.
All right. Yeah, I mean, the recommendations have a wide range of, I'll call it timelines. And I do think it's important that we consider this during our process of trying to find a new CAO, simply because we want to find a CAO that understands and respects the direction we want to go. And this report certainly makes some interesting suggestions. So I'm going to suggest myself right now that we defer this until after closed session, and then we'll get into a conversation on it then. So I say, in the meantime, why don't we have a discussion on what was going to be item 13B of our new business, and that's with regards to the LDD moth spraying. There were some suggestions that we look at passing a resolution today. I believe it was Councillor Wiancko who first was prepared to pass a resolution. And I wonder if Councillor Wiancko, you want to speak to this matter at all first, because you brought it up first.
Oh, I think I agree with Councillor Hazelton that people are in discussions with getting spraying done. You know, my neighbors are one of them, and we're expected to put some money down there in the next couple of months on the potential to spray. So I think it's important that people don't go ahead and make a lot of commitments and then find out later that the township has banned BT. So I think it's important that we make a decision today. And we've got both sides of the issues, and I know I'm going to vote, but I think we got both sides of the issue. I can't see wasting staff valuable time in preparing another report. I'm not sure what would change in our opinion, having heard both sides. So I think we should go ahead today and pass a resolution.
Thank you. We got CO Gunby followed by Councillor Hazelton, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that Cody is here, and I know that he had some information that he quickly sort of jumbled together for you all based on what he's already been looking at. And if you want for him to present it, he's here to do so.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hazelton, and followed by Councillor Bocek.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to recommend that we follow through with the same decision we made last year. We made a decision as council that our position on the spraying, etc., and anything to do with the LDD moth was an informational path, and that we were going to provide best information possible to our residents, and that we were not going to take any action to spray township properties or other things like that. And I would suggest that a simple path forward on this is for us to reiterate that and indicate that we do not need staff to go off and do any more research on this, that we basically just reinforce the previous decision we have made and published, and that we allow citizens to do what they have the right to do today. Thank you.
Councillor Bocek.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. If we're going to move forward with this today, I would like to see something in the way of this council is not going to approve the aerial spraying of this BTK, whatever, in the township of Georgian Bay. I don't want to see that as a resolution. I don't mind seeing that we're not going to ban it. The township is not going to ban this aerial spraying, but I don't want to see us approving it either. I think if we simply allow our constituents to do what they want and there's no governance on what they can and can't do, I think that works for me. But when you make a ruling and you approve something, that is almost like the Council of Georgian Bay is handshaking and saying it's okay. I would rather see it that we don't ban the aerial spraying and just leave it. Don't put anything into place. Don't change anything. The status quo is fine. If somebody wants aerial spraying right now, they can do it until this council bans area spraying. So I think we don't need to approve it. We just need to do nothing. My comments. Thank you.
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor Kutzer. And I think what Councillor Bocek is saying is pretty much the same thing that Councillor Hazelton is saying, which is that we've already got something which says we're going to educate our community and we're not taking a position one way or the other. And I think that is the wise approach. So I think we're there more or less, other than we restate what we already stated. Thank you.
Well, I do think part of that though would be we'd have to rescind the request that council made of the staff to do more work. And speaking of staff, I'm wondering if Mr. Avery, oh, I saw, he seems to have disappeared. He was there a minute ago. Because I was wondering whether he might want to provide some input, because CO Gunby certainly suggested that he had done some work on it. There he's back, good. Mr. Avery, would you like to express just a quick update of what things that you have learned in regard to this? You can sort of hear the tone of where a council is headed, I think, but if you have any additional input, I'm sure they would appreciate it.
Good morning. Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, sorry, I was on there and I got kicked out just previously to speaking here. If you could recall, staff were directed by council in December to essentially report back on, I guess, two different passive information, one being the regulations around aerial spraying or aerial application, and the other being the effects that the pesticide would have on pollinators. One thing that I can mention is that there is no staff on hand here that are experts with reference to aerial spraying and the effects it has on pollinators. So we've reached out to the SSEA, the Severn Sound Environmental Association, for some comment, and further the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. But I guess I can give Cole's note summary of some of the research that we've done so far based on that resolution that staff received. And in short, there are federal and provincial legislations that are currently active that regulate everything from the application to aerial spraying to the different types of pesticides that can be used. I know that there was 2 earlier delegations this morning that provided an in-depth overview of those types of regulations and the legislation around that. In particular, some of the research that staff have done with reference to municipal perspective and the legislation. In short, yes, the municipality can create bylaws to regulate pesticide application. However, there is lots of case law out there based on some of the review we've done and some preliminary discussions with external legal counsel that the municipalities that have regulated aerial or pesticide application have gone down a slippery slope. There are some case law examples that have basically cascaded all the way to the Supreme Court level with regards to municipalities getting in the game of banning or regulating application of pesticides. So in short, based on that resolution that staff received, we are in the process of obtaining a legal opinion from our external legal counsel. That's something that's already been in the works, and we're expecting to receive that shortly. Both myself and Karina King were expected to create a report, and our tentative timeline was for the February council meeting to report back to staff on some of those findings. So if council wishes to not have staff do that, that'll be a direction that'll be needed. But in short, we are obtaining that legal opinion. Some of the preliminary work, as I just mentioned, that we've done states kind of the same direction that I'm seeing council go here with some of the conversations earlier.
Thank you very much. I'm wondering, council, as one option to consider is that if we rescind the resolution of, was it just in December, I think we made that resolution. If we rescind that resolution, then we would take away the doubt that residents have that we may try to control spraying. I mean, because from my perspective, and I said this earlier, we as a council, regardless of what the legal implications may be, but in a simple form, we have 3 options. One is to actively do the spraying ourselves, and I don't think we have any appetite to do that, so that's gone. So now we're down to 2 options. One option is to provide information, which is what we're currently doing for our residents on the various ways of controlling these LDD moths. And the third option is to ban the spraying of the BTK. And as Mr. Avery's advised, that could easily be going down a legal slippery slope. And I'm hearing limited appetite from the council, and please, if the councilor wants to correct me, please do so, that I don't think council wants to go down that slippery slope. And if they don't, then to me, the only choice we really have is to rescind the, oh, I just got the peace sign from Councillor Cooper. The only is basically to rescind the resolution last month which was going to lead us down exploring the possibility of banning, because we don't want to, if we don't want to do that anyway. So that's what I'm going to offer now for the next round of discussion. Do we simply want to rescind last month's resolution and then just carry forward with last year's resolution of providing information? Councillor Bocek, followed by Councillor Douglas.
The answer to your question, Mr. Mayor, from me is yes. And the reason being, I'll give you a typical example. If we approve the aerial spraying and Councillor Cooper decides to spray his place and his neighbor takes offense to it and wants to sue him, we're going to be named as a party in the claim. If Councillor Cooper sprays his property and the township of Georgian Bay did not approve spraying or made no comment on it, then we won't be named as a party in the claim in the action against us. So I say, stay in our lane, let the feds and the province govern over this, and don't expose us to any liability when it comes to this. If people want to spray, let them assume the responsibility. Don't shift it over to council. Thank you.
Councillor Douglas.
Thank you. I think Councillor Bocek covered a few things that I was going to bring up. I think that we should rescind that resolution and just perhaps we can word in the new resolution, or part of what we're going to say here is that we'll continue to provide information as becomes available to the township, as there is more information coming through by the sounds of it through Cody. Thank you. And I think we should do nothing because what Councillor Bocek brought up and other councillors have as well. And I do think that what was presented to us this morning really, to me, it very much so pointed out how accurate their spraying is. So, and the conditions that they have to spray under. So the overspray would be very, it seems to me that there's a good point made that this is not going to impede on a neighbor that may not want it. So I'd be in favor of rescinding the previous resolution.
Clerk Way, I wonder if you haven't already crafted a resolution for council's consideration in whatever is required to rescind last month's resolution.
Oh, I just lost the page I was on. Hold on. It's really simple. Be it resolved that council does hereby rescind resolution C-038-2021. And that'll make it so it never happened.
And I would have that moved by Councillor Bocek, seconded by Councillor Wiancko. How's that? Okay. So, council, all those in favor of rescinding last month's resolution? All right, I got everybody's voting in favor of that. Now the question is, does anybody want to make any other resolutions on this topic, or is the discussion now closed? I'm not seeing anybody speak up, and I think unfortunately some people are slashing their necks, which is never a good sign. But okay, so let's consider that topic satisfied, and I'm going to suggest, Clerk Way and Council, that we do the Section 14 bylaws and then we break for lunch. And then when we come back from lunch, we will go directly into closed session. That's my suggestion to Council. Okay, let's do that. So, I have to find the right page in this whole collection, don't I?
Page 31. Your worship.
Thank you very much. So page, excuse me, page 31 that I have is moved by Councillor Jarvis, seconded by Councillor Douglas. Be it resolved that Council adopts bylaw 2022-002 to appoint Julie Boutiette as the acting CEO for the Township of Georgian Bay. Councillor Hazelton, you have a comment.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'm a little anal on some of the details. First of all, I am 100% supportive of appointing Julie as acting CAO. But every time we have an opportunity to revisit wording and so on, what I'd like to do is just get some clarity on some of the items and make, excuse me, make some suggestions on some other items. I will also point out that This must have been a hand-typed entry as opposed to a cut and paste, because I went back and reviewed this in comparison to the acting CAO appointment of Jessica. And there are some certain typos and missives in this whole thing, which we probably want to clarify as well. Sorry for being so anal on this, but my first question or comment is we've got in item D, where it says to establish, maintain organizational structure, blah, blah, blah. We are in receipt of the Black Line Consulting Report, and I'm just thinking here, perhaps out loud, that there should be an obligation for the CAO to consult with council prior to making any changes. Now, I want to highlight, first of all, that our current CAO, Ms. Gunby, has gone out of her way to do that on a regular basis voluntarily. And I fully expect that Julie would do that as well. But it just occurs to me that the language doesn't encourage that. And I thought that that would be something that we might want to tweak a little bit to get that in there. Mayor, may I go on?
Yes.
So I was looking at item number 5, and again, being a little anal on the wording here, the mayor and members of council, in accordance with the policy, blah, 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 shall, except for the purposes of general public information. And so I'm trying to figure out what that really means. And perhaps I could get clarification on this. So regarding topics of general public information, so if I, as a resident, can ask these questions of staff, does that also mean that I, as a counselor, asking questions that a resident might ask, do I also have the ability of interacting with staff at the township? Or because I'm a counselor, does that mean I can never talk to anybody on staff and only talk to the CAO?
Ms. Way, you had your hand up. No, okay. I mean, I think, and I could be corrected by staff, but I believe what this is basically saying is that we as counselors do not lose any of the rights of the general public. In other words, we can make inquiries of any staff member on things that have nothing to do with council, but have to do with our personal circumstances. But we cannot, as a counselor, do anything except through the CAO. And Ms. Gunby is going to correct me, is she?
I'm just going to state that based on previous discussion that all of council is aware of and voted in the affirmative, all communications are supposed to come directly to the CAO from members of council.
So I hear what our current CEO is saying. I would say that this clause potentially is in conflict on that. And I by way of reference, I would like to highlight that Councillor Douglas, who is a contractor, according to the wording or the interpretation that we just got from our current CAO, Councillor Douglas would never be able to talk to anybody in the planning or the building department because she is a councillor and is prevented, therefore, from talking directly to anybody except the CAO. And I'm not sure that's what the intent of this is. I will share a specific example for myself where I was attempting to act in liaison with the Honey Harbor Community Church, Inc. And we needed to talk to the planning department. And I was informed that because I'm a counselor, I am not allowed to have communications with the planning department in any way, shape, or form. And so I just wanted to highlight that we're in a situation here where I think we are dangerously binary in this interpretation. And I think what I heard earlier, which is if it's as defined here, if it's communication regarding topics of general public information that are not, they're not council or township business related, I can't see any reason why we shouldn't be able to talk to any member of staff because we are equivalent to a resident. But okay. Where the matter,
let's let staff respond to this. CEO Gunby.
I've already responded.
Okay.
If council wants to rescind that resolution, they can do that. That's up to council.
Councillor Cooper.
At the risk of reciting the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, we do have the right to speak to people. And I think this resolution we passed was a little bit overreaching. I think what you'd expressed, Mayor Fitzgerald, here was a more practical approach, which is we can't go out and represent council and take on sort of an approach as a councillor, but we can certainly represent our community, represent ourselves, and anywhere we like. So to enforce something that is quite as didactic as I'm hearing, I don't think is reasonable. So I'll stop my comments on that particular issue, but I do have a couple of other, I think, technical points with this contract, shall we say, this resolution that need to be dealt with because of some previous history we've dealt with at the Township of Georgian Bay. Thank you.
I think, if I may, Councillor Cooper, you made two comments that to me are extremely important. One is whether you're representing yourself versus representing your community. If you're representing your community, then you're wearing your councillor hat. And I think that's different than representing yourself. Councillor Wiancko, do you want to jump into this?
Yeah, I never supported the resolution in the first place. And I'll suggest that we try to rescind that resolution. The problem I have found myself in is that people have come to me to ask me to help them with a situation. And I said, it'll be faster if you represent yourself and go directly to the director, because I can't. So they're not happy with that. But if they wanted a fast turnaround, they better represent themselves, because I have to go through the CAO and it'll probably be a few days to do that. So I'm all for rescinding that resolution. If I could find somebody else to support me, I'm really willing to do it as soon as possible.
Now I'm afraid we're totally off topic here.
Mm-hmm.
Because the topic here is whether or not we're going to appoint Ms. Btk as our acting CAO. And I think everybody here is willing to do so. And so now the only question is whether one or two of the words or parts of this resolution have to be modified. CEO Gunby.
Thank you. I recommend that, because when this comes up, there's usually different concerns. I think these are different from the last time, and we amended them from the last time. But when the bylaw comes up to appoint a permanent CAO, council will have between now and then to give the clerk all of their suggested changes to discuss at an upcoming meeting.
All right. So we're going to go Bocek and Jarvis now, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm going to add my comments to this, since it's taken this form in stating what's in the resolution. I think our CAO identified an issue, identified a problem with losing her staff.
In closed session, I did. And this would be a closed session discussion if we want to continue it.
Yeah, so I'm just saying that, you know, if I ever wanted to contact a department head, I would contact the CAO first. Contact the CAO and say, I have a special need. Jessica, I need to speak to Brad in operations about the Pratt Road culvert. Then she'd say, okay, go ahead. But it's not, you know, I see why it was put into place. We were losing staff like crazy.
But again, we're going off topic here. And Councillor Jarvis, are you going to be on the same topic? Or are you going to get back to the appointment of Ms. Btk?
Back to the appointment.
Okay.
This, excuse me, Mr. Mayor, if I may, my point is that perhaps leaving this in place with Julie coming on board gives her some protection until we appoint a new CAO. And I think by rescinding this, we've left Julie wide open to councillors going behind her back, talking, and maybe we're going to see more people quit. She'll have no control. So I think during the interim period to keep this bylaw in place is great. When we choose a new CAO, whenever that may be, we can make a rescindent then, or we can make a change to the bylaw.
I'll be very clear. I do not want to entertain a rescind a resolution on another topic that was originally done and closed during this open council session.
Okay, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Councillor Jarvis.
Yeah, just a helpful suggestion. One, I'm very much in favor of this, so don't take it any other way. It's just a helpful suggestion that maybe within the wording of this and the following bylaw, we've taken the term acting CAO, which is what this one is all about, and all of a sudden it becomes just CAO within the body of the bylaw. And I'm thinking that we should be just taking that, and wherever there is the term CAO as it pertains to the position we're talking about, we should be changing that to read acting CAO, so that it is not assumed that our acting CAO is now our CAO. Again, a helpful suggestion.
Thank you. Councillor Hazelton, followed by Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor. I had several other items that I had wanted to talk about, but we all got sidetracked on that other one, which obviously is something of keen interest for several councillors. So I think that we want to make sure we don't lose track of that. But my focus here on this wordsmithing of this is to, we don't look at documents until they're in front of us and we need to pass them. And otherwise, we would never look at them and say, well, what's good about this clause or what's not good about this clause and what do we need to fix? And Clerk Way wants to talk about it, so I'll stop.
Clerk Way.
I feel like we're getting into the weeds a little bit, and by doing so, we're kind of getting off the point of what we're supposed to be doing with this particular item. I'm hear a lot of valid points being made, but the point for today is, are we appointing Julie as acting CAO? This is the time we have to do that, to pass this bylaw. If we don't, then we have to have a special council meeting between now and the end of the week, which I don't think any of us would like to do. If there isn't gravely errors within this bylaw that council has issues with from an acting CAO standpoint, I would recommend that we move forward. And if there are changes or direction to the CAO that perhaps is not in keeping with the vision to be moved forward, that's why we have the recruitment firm. That's why we will be discussing this further in closed. A lot of this discussion should not be in open. And I think we need to very much tread carefully and be mindful of our procedures and ensure that we're staying on point with the agenda.
So, Mayor, given that
yes,
I handed the baton back over to Clerk Way, the essence of the issues that I have with the wording are not generally material. Some of them, for example, in item number 9, which talks about an alternative acting cap as opposed to CAO. I mean, there's a bunch of typos in here. I think we need to get it clarified. So I would be much happier with us approving what we have for the sake of moving on. But if we could then ask staff to bring this document back to us in February for us to revisit the wording in it and get clarification on it, because I think that there are several items that we want to pay attention to here that perhaps aren't material or really significant, but if we're going to do it, let's get it right. Let's get it accurate. Let's get all the text, 100%, so that we don't have typos and so on. And that's really what I would like to see, because as far as I'm concerned, we're asking the top person in our township to do and be responsible for all these things. And when they're not crystal clear, I think that that's a path that we don't want to take. So let's take the time, bring it back, and let us clarify it. But as far as I'm concerned, I am delighted that Julie is prepared to step up, and I absolutely support approving her today.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'd be happy to follow that process, but I really do feel that there are a couple of items that may impact us longer term. And Julie, first of all, I'm delighted that you've agreed to take over. Thank you very much for that. I want you to know I'm fully in support of that. I do have some issues around some verbiage, including acting versus interim, including a period of time. And the reason I raise this, I'll be happy to discuss this in closed session, but in the past, we've had issues with acting people forcing the township to hire full-time, and not in my time, but just prior to my time. So that was highly problematic. We also have a record here of, with our current CAO, who came on as an acting CAO, we could be, if we took that same sort of approach, using the term acting means that it leads to permanent. So I think we need to be very careful in terms of the direction we take and the verbiage we use, and what we may end up doing from a labor law perspective. So I just want us to be a little bit careful. Thank you.
All right. Much lengthier discussion on this item than I had originally expected. But I think some things have been aired, but what I do have in front of me is moved by Councillor Jarvis, second by Councillor Douglas. Be it resolved that Council adopts bylaw 2022-002 to appoint Julie Boutiette as the acting CAO for the Township of Georgian Bay. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Ms. Boutiette, you start acting next week.
Actually, Saturday at 12:01, technically.
Okay. You start acting in 5 days, 6 days, whatever that works out to be. And the direct consequence of that, we have one more resolution, and that is moved by Councillor Bochek, seconded by Councillor Cooper. Be it resolved that Council adopts bylaw 2022-003 to appoint Celine Anderson as the acting treasurer for the Township of Georgian Bay. Any discussion on that bylaw? Councillor Jarvis.
I'll just reiterate what I mentioned earlier. The acting position, I think, should be something that is throughout the document. So there's no assumption that it's a permanent position. Other than that, I'm very happy to see that we've got somebody to fill in that regard, and that it's Celine. So I'm fine with the idea. I just have, it's one of the things I think we should go over the document again soon so we can get it corrected for future. That's all.
Councillor Cooper.
Ditto. Thank you.
All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. All right, I'm going to suggest we take a break for lunch. And why don't we go? Ms. Way, you want something else?
2 more bylaws to be passed, please. If you keep flipping pages. There's the interim tax levy and the temporary borrowing bylaw.
Where the heck was that in our agenda?
It was under consent, the reports, but the bylaws are listed under bylaws.
Oh, if you say so. I didn't see it on the agenda, but I have to take your word for it, because, well, so we haven't passed those by approving the consent agenda. Then. Okay, well, let's do that. It's wise to keep the clerk happy. I move by Councillor Hazelton, seconded by Councillor Wiancko. Be it resolved that Council enacts bylaw 2022-004 to provide for an interim tax levy for all classes and to provide for the payment of taxes. An annual routine, this. Any discussion? All those in favor? And I have enough hands to say that is carried. Thank you. And then moved by Councillor Douglas, second by Councillor Jarvis. Be it resolved, the council enacts bylaw 2022-005, which authorizes temporary borrowing to meet the 2022 current expenditures pending receipt of revenues in accordance with section 407 of the Municipal Act 2001. Any discussion or questions? All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Now, should I suggest a lunch break, Ms. Way? Okay. I'm going to suggest we break for lunch. It's now 10 to 1. Councilor Wiancko.
Well, can we, coming back from lunch, can we get to the point where we can just log into the closed session? In other words, get out of this now and then come back at 1 o'clock and log into the closed session? Because right now we have to come back to this one.
That's an excellent suggestion. So I'll read that resolution then for everyone. Ms. Way?
Yes.
Okay. Then I have moved by Councillor Wiancko, seconded by Councillor Cooper. How's that? I'll make Councillor Wiancko the mover. Whereas section 239(2) of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended provides authority for councils of municipalities to close a meeting or parts of a meeting to the public if the subject matter pertains to a matter identified in section 239(2). Who wrote this thing? It's so confusing, all this darn provincial laws. And whereas the Council of the Township of Georgian Bay deems it necessary to close this section portion of the meeting in order to address matters under for the following section of, guess what, 239(2). A, Special Council closed minutes of December 6th, 2021. B, Council closed minutes of December 13th, 2021. C, Planning Council closed minutes of December 14th, 2021. D, Black Line final report in regards to personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. And E, CEO recruitment under personal matters about identified individual, including municipal or local board employees, labor relations, or employee negotiations. Be it resolved, the Council Township of Georgian Bay moves in the closed session of council at, now do you want this current time or do you want to like 1:30, Ms. Way?
At 1:30.
1:30. I'm suggesting we come back at 1:30 if that's all right with everyone. So let's move into closed council as of 1:30 p.m. So we'll click on that link that was provided to us at 1:30 and meet that way. All right. Now, can we go for lunch?
Yes.
I get nods of approval of that. Good. So I'll say let's break now and we'll reconvene at 1:30 in closed session, please.